All right, we're doing this shit again. It is Real News Wednesday, and it's the 6th of June, 2018. Somehow people are not dead en masse yet, even though we have Trump for what it is. What is it? 1.5 years now. Um, fucking housekeeping. We'll be doing this every Wednesday, so if you decide you want to show up, you can send us news topics that have happened. Pretty much just the bridge between last Wednesday and this. And this will be one of the 2 3-hour streams that I do weekly. I like, at least as far as what I have planned. In the future, that'll very likely change, but largely, this is the schedule that seems to work right now. Additionally, when I finally figured out how to get my internet to not be, fucking itself, I'll be doing a regular daily news stream in the mornings. It'll be an antidote to the overly positive morning news. So if you want to see that happen, become a patron on Patreon, and I'll be starting to do that as my daily content production schedule. It'll be an hour stream every day to just talk about how much everything sucks. So let me know if you are interested in that. There are Patreon links in the Facebook post I made about that, and also in the support me section of the description. This is also brought to you by Liberty Mugs, the mugs you could use to piss off your coworkers, and it's brought to you by the Brave browser, which is an ad-free, tracker-free browsing experience you can use to subvert the way that the feds want to track you with all your fucking computer shit, and keep those advertisers off your back. Maybe subvert the economy and get it to be right back where it should have, producing quality shit, not just shit that can get people ad clicks. It's also brought to you by the CryptoTab. CryptoTab is a browser extension for Chrome-based browsers that lets you use spare CPU power to browse cryptocurrency, specifically Bitcoin. So if you're interested in doing that and getting a bunch of people on board so that you can have your own little pyramid scheme, go for it. And the link to that is in the description. But without further ado, we've got one guest on so far. If you decide you want to join, hit me up and I'll add you to the stream. But we've got one guest so far. He's here to talk about several things, and he's going to start, I believe, with Tommy Robinson. But before he does that, let's introduce yourself and tell people what you do and where they can find you.
Hey everybody, I'm Lupinate the Anarchic Wolf. I'm currently doing most of my main content on Steemit and Google Plus with a little bit on Minds. You can find me on Steemit as Anarchic Wolf, on Minds as Lupinate, and as Daniel Hatfield on Google Plus. And just quickly doing a couple of shout outs to see if anybody was fancy joining this stream. Quickly on some of those particular channels, so just give me a second. But yeah, I wanted to talk about Tommy Robinson in particular because he is very topical and there is not very much positive press regarding him or his supporters. Now, I don't necessarily agree with all or much of what he has said in the past, or even too much of what he said in the future, given the current present, given the fact that I'm an anarchist. But I won't deny that he is an independent journalist and he deserves a right to report on any topical event happening. And the one that he is particularly interested in is, and I have to be very careful as I say this, a particular subset of the UK society, which has been accused of running a massive, basically child rape gang. Now, this is quite a poignant and divisive topic, but there have been a lot of protests in Britain about it. And for one, I think many of the numbers have been underreported. But for another, it's important to note most of them are treated as far right or other types of demonstrators. So I had to find one from the Mirror to eventually find something that actually resembled remotely unbiased reporting. And it titles, Tommy Robinson supporters bring Leeds to a standstill in angry protest after ex-EDL leader jailed. I'd like to highlight the fact most people don't really highlight how Tommy Robinson no longer is part of the EDL, which is an admittedly highly racist group within Britain. However, Tommy Robinson has changed his views on race to a very large extent. He is nationalist, but he isn't racist from my perspective. I have not really seen that, not any longer at least. And the kinds of things that he has been reporting on involve a particular community, which shall not be named in this discussion, from my side at least. And that will be basically he has been jailed for contempt of court after being arrested for breaching the peace for doing a broadcast on Facebook Live. Now, Leeds Live reports the protest march brought the city centre to a standstill, and although the police initially appeared overwhelmed, they soon got the protesters, who shouted abuse at the press, police, and members of the public, under control. Xenophobic chanting was heard by supporters of Tommy, whose real name is Stephen Yaxley Lennon. A number of demonstrations across the country have been planned, including one on Saturday, June the 9th, where thousands of supporters are expected to head to Whitehall. There are roughly 400 people at the protest in Leeds, and chants of "Tommy is a legend" rang out, along with chants of that the police were, quote, scum. And to be honest, it doesn't... From the photos taken, there's no... I'm not going to play the videos at the moment, but from the photos taken and included in the Mirror article, which I'll copy in the... Well, I've already provided the links to Jeremiah, so should be easy enough for that to be included in the comment section or the details section below, right?
Yeah. I'm
Cool.
gonna like every topic covered. I'm gonna have a running list of things that I'll copy and paste from a notepad document when this is done.
Fair enough, mate. So to continue on with regards to this, one supporter threw a red flare on top of a court building, and a Dr. Pepper bottle was thrown at police officers as chaos ensued. Which is, I'll be honest, it's incredibly hyperbolic, but this is the Mirror. They're trying to sell papers, so... The crowd reacted with a huge cheer, however, as it missed and hit the court wall. Police had already closed off the road as supporters bellowed choruses of "Oh, Tommy, 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 Tommy Robinson," and "Free Tommy now" down the street. Many fans are brandished... Oh, God. Mirror, you need to work on your grammar. Many fans have brandished #Free Tommy placards, with one which reads, "Free the truth teller, free Tommy." West Yorkshire police were sent out in force. They had to basically create a human cordon. Mounted officers were deployed for some reason as well. Men were carrying St. George flags, and others have Union Jacks. One man shouted, "This is the land of St. George. Try and arrest me." One bald-headed supporter mad at Mr. Robinson's jailing said, "Journalists, F off, you're all scum." Robinson is currently being held at Her Majesty's Prison Hull after pleading guilty to contempt of court last Friday. He had initially been arrested on the court steps for breaching the peace. Now, Personally, this is where I get particularly incensed. He's arrested for a crime and then convicted of a completely different crime. Now,
Like Al
that's
Capone, sort of.
yeah, kinda. Now, the slight difference is Capone had it coming. Um, this guy's just reporting the news officially, and he was being very careful about it. He was only reporting that which was publicly available information anyway,
Well, he
just
was
as
also
I'm
shouting
doing
at them
now.
when they were going in.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
I said, well, he was also shouting at them while they were going in. He was not being unbiased.
Mm, that's fair enough. I'm not going to deny that. He isn't, though. That's the point. And
Well, you don't have to be, but you do. And
no,
this is sort of where I take issue with that on a commentary level, not a strict news level, but on a commentary level. Like he's constantly talking about like how people should follow the law and how legal immigration is the only kind of immigration that should be allowed because in a blah blah society blah blah must happen. So I mean, realistically speaking, this might be a case where he either and I talked about this on Twitter the other day, and people thought I was saying it was okay that he was jailed for doing what he did, but I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying, however, is that this is going to swing either one of two ways. He's either going to realize that maybe the law isn't like the ultimate arbiter of ethics and stop, saying that every male Muslim who's become a refugee in the past decade should be deported. Or he's going to swing the opposite way, be radicalized by race politics and the fake corrective system, and decide to become ever more extremist than he was before. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see where this swings on that level.
well, from a narrative perspective, this is, as I said, this is one of the least aggressive against Tommy that I could find. And it is very right-leaning source, to be honest, for Britain. Compared to America, a right-leaning source is a bloody unicorn compared to the States over here. And most of them I wouldn't consider that right-leaning compared to the US. Now, that's from either a social perspective or even an economic one. A lot of them are pretty much everybody is a supporter of the NHS in Britain. And because they're voluntarily supporting it, I'm not going to argue with them on that one at all. But with regards to this, not many people are really supporting this, apart from people who believe in identity politics, because it's that which drives all of this stuff. And I never used to consider that term particularly relevant for anything, but nowadays it seems to be the only thing that matters.
But here's the thing, that's sort of smoke and mirrors. I mean, identity politics is hugely important in terms of how it's raising future generations, but in terms of overall political impact, you're going to get a lot more from the fact that that the elites essentially are monopolizing everything and more squeezing out the little guy and this is why they want us fighting each other. Let me let me read you some fucking tweets. And I don't have any quote sources for this, so this is mostly just commentary, but let me read you some tweets about something that happened recently. That is a kids movie got released. At least the poster for advertising the trailer for a kids movie. Fucking it's How to Train Your Dragon 3. I think we're on that fucking one now.
Yeah.
And Toothless is looking at a female dragon who's also white, and he's fucking gonna be in a relationship with this female dragon, and there are a huge amount of people shouting about how this is somehow forcing the hetero agenda on kids. Literally have that I'll be linking from a tweet that I made about this. And when I tweeted about this and tagged the
giddy
people
up.
who had been saying these things, like they accused me of not having a job just because I fucking criticized their shit. But it's so
Well, of
obvious.
course they do. That's ad hominem. That's the basic default position of the left. If in doubt, insult them,
Well,
and
the right,
therefore
though.
you
That's
win the
point.
argument. And I don't know where this has come. I really don't know where that has come from. Where people think because you say something that is hurtful, spiteful, and makes the other person somehow look bad, you win.
Well, it's
That
okay,
never
and I know where
works.
this has come from. It's come from the same stock and standard fucking Coliseum idea that the elites have always pushed. The elites have always pushed the idea that citizens fighting each other is better than citizens fighting the state. So they're always going to fight each other, and the best fighters will get the most praise, even if they're not, fighting intellectually, even if they're not trying to do so on some sort of equal grounds. They're still gonna try and fight somehow, and like that's why these gag orders, like the Tommy Robinson one, are so important, because they really highlight the fact that courts will use any excuse to hide their actions, including the excuse of breaching the peace when somebody was essentially just standing in a place, because that way they can keep doing all their shit in the background, because we're fighting each other over who's more racist, over who's more sexist, over who's more name and noun. So I mean, realistically speaking, the elites like this. They want this, and that's the reason it's happening.
Of course they do. I mean, there's no denying that. But you made a point on the fact that there was a gag order. Thankfully, that has now been lifted. Otherwise, I wouldn't even have been able to report what I just reported legally, and neither would have the Mirror. So
Right.
it's worth mentioning the fact that the journalists at least started to see that things are going too far here. And because of that, they actually stood up and argued in court that, no, you cannot gag us to report on this. That's against everything that is in British law and goes against everything for British common law. So, yeah, that's not how it works here. And the judges agreed. So it's important to, or the jury, I should say, agreed. And because that's how most of these things are determined over here, at least, is by jury. And I'm quietly hopeful that seeing how the judges in Britain have been saying things like dulling knives will reduce death rates by knives, and I mean, that is, oh my God. It's like, I really do wish doctors would speak out against that, because from a medical perspective, it's a lot harder to suture a dull inflicted wound than a sharp inflicted wound, because it's much more ragged and jaggedy, and it can cause a lot worse damage to some extent than a sharp slice.
Because here's the real point, is that, ironically, because that's what they're dulling, but here's the real point, that you'll find a weapon wherever you want. If somebody wants to, like, take a shovel from a construction site and bash somebody's head in, if somebody wants to take a crowbar and beat somebody's arm with it, they're gonna find a way. Violence is irrational. It's not designed to be something where people like make a calculated decision. Well, that's illegal. That's against federal codes. I won't be buying a knife from this guy I know down the street. I won't be buying a gun. I won't be doing any of this stuff because all this is illegal. And they're not going to be. It's not like they're going to fill out a form.
No, it's the old argument of, if you make weapons illegal, the only people who can own weapons are criminals and police officers. And
you mean criminals and criminals?
Semantics. But again, remember where I am. I have to be careful. But yeah, the when you've got that kind of dichotomy, it never ends well. It always descends into corruption. Always. There's no
Right.
way of avoiding it.
Here's a good example for another news story that I wanted to cover. California to fine citizens using over 55 gallons of water as Nestle pumps billions of gallons for free. This is
Yes,
real.
and yeah, I know this is real. When I first read that California was proposing to limit individual water restrictions by that amount, I then recalled just how much they basically listed alongside it in the article that I read, that it's like 80 to 100 gallons for a bathtub to be filled. To have a quick shower is like 17 gallons. God knows how much to run a dishwasher, but it's at least 40 to do one load of laundry. So, I mean,
and that's not even to say cleaning cars,
yeah,
medical facilities, fucking.
yes.
You
I
know,
mean,
so let me read this article and get your impressions on it.
Go ahead.
While California places drastic restrictions on the amount of water residents are allowed to use each day, Nestle is stealing millions of gallons of water with no repercussions. California has become the first state to pass a law severely limiting the amount of water residents can use on a daily basis. And while politicians claim that the restrictions will be enforced in the name of conserving water, Nestle is illegally stealing millions of gallons of water each year, and the state is doing nothing to stop it. Governor Jerry Brown signed Senate Bill 606 and Assembly Bill 1668 into law, both of which set new standards for water management planning. The restrictions will fully take effect by 2022, limiting residents to 55 gallons of water per person per day. That number will decrease to 50 gallons per person per day by 2030. The bill would impose civil liability for a violation of an order of regulation issued pursuant to these provisions as specified. The bill would also authorize the board to issue a regulation or informational order requiring a wholesale water supplier, urban retail water supplier, or distributor of a public water supply to provide a monthly report relating to water production, water use, or water conservation. To put the allotted daily amount of water into perspective, a report from CBS Sacramento noted that an 8-minute shower uses about 17 gallons of water, a load of laundry up to 40, and a bathtub can hold 80 to 100 gallons of water, meaning that residents would have to give up showers on the day that they wanted to wash one load of laundry. Taking a bath would be nearly impossible. That is not to mention the fact that each time an individual go for it.
Just to jump in, if you're an individual and you don't have a family within your home, it is impossible to take a bath in California under these regulations. Just point of order there.
Right. What was it? This is not to mention the fact that each time an individual flushes a toilet, up to 7 gallons of water is used, and around 6 gallons of water is needed for a full dishwasher cycle. If a family fails to budget how much water is being used by each child during the course of a day, or their home has a water leak they're unaware of, they could end up facing massive fines. Residents will face fines if they fail to comply with the initial 55-gallon per day water limit, and water districts will be required to set targets for water use with outdoor water allowances based on the region. The Pacific Standard also noted that beginning in 2027, districts that exceed their annual budgets will face fines of $10,000 per day. Residents told CBS Sacramento that they are concerned about the new regulations and whether they will be able to comply without giving up basic necessities. Tanya Allen, a mother who lives with a 4-year-old daughter, says with a child and every day having to wash clothes, that's just, my opinion, not feasible. But I get it, and I understand that we're trying to preserve, but 55 gallons a day? While California residents prepare for a new crackdown on water use that could cost them thousands of dollars in fines, it raises the question, is California conserving water in all aspects, or are residents being forced to cut back while corporations have free rein and the government fails to intervene? In December 2017, the Free Thought Project, which is where this article is, reported that Nestle has been illegally extracting more than 60 million gallons of water per year from California's San Bernardino National Forest, which amounts to billions of gallons of water stolen over the last 68 years, even though it lacks the legal rights and has never provided a valid basis of right to the water. The glaring misconduct was detailed in an investigation conducted by the California State Water Resources Control Board, which revealed that Nestle reports diversions under 11 groundwater records under the State Water Board's groundwater recordation program. And from 1947 to 2015, Nestle's reported extractions averaged 192 acre feet, or 62.6 million gallons per year. The State Water Resources Control Board Division of Water Rights received several water rights complaints against Nestle Waters North America starting on April 20th, 2015. The complaint allegations included diversion of water without a valid basis of right, unreasonable use of water, injury to public trust resources, and incorrect or missing reporting, all regarding Nestle's diversion of water from springs at the headwaters of Strawberry Creek in the San Bernardino National Forest for bottling under the Arrowhead label. Many of the complainants emphasized their concern about the impacts of Nestle's diversions during California's recent historic drought. Multiple complaints have been filed against the corporation, and even after an investigation by a state agency revealed that billions of gallons of water have been stolen over the last 70 years, no one has been charged for their role in the illegal scheme, and Nestle continues to steal the drought-stricken state's most precious resource, as is typically the case when big government turns a blind eye to the corrupt actions of big corporations. The residents of California who are forced to fund their government through taxes are the ones who suffer from the lack of water. At the same time, the new regulations that are being put in place in the name of conserving water are actually the latest cover-up to shield both the state and the corporations it is protecting from any form of legitimate accountability. Now, after I, say my little piece on this, I want Finian to introduce himself to anybody who's not familiar with Finian yet. But let me just say that I think this is, probably the direct result of lobbying, probably from people like Nestle, because the more these regulations happen, the more people will seek their water elsewhere, and the more these people will have every reason to not use municipal water sources and to instead switch to water sources that they can buy at a store, because what's cheaper, $1,000 fine or a fucking gallon of water at Walmart? Well, probably the gallon of water at Walmart. And who bottles that? Well, gee, Nestle maybe. So, I mean, I think a lot of this is a direct result of people not looking at, who benefits, cui bono. I mean, I think that realistically speaking, we've got an issue of collusion on a specific scale. And it's sort of the same with the Tommy Robinson case in a lot of ways, because it's the government basically deciding whether or not these people get to stay, and nobody gets to talk about it, but they definitely get to rule on it, which means that essentially they get to go unopposed while they force their opinion. But, I could just be like reaching here. I'm not exactly sure. I just think that the double standard with the state is very obvious, and in many ways, the kind of thing that people are overlooking when they're fighting over cartoon dragons. Finian, you can introduce yourself now, and then we can get Lubinet's take on the water restrictions, and yours as well if you have any.
Yeah, I do actually have a couple thoughts on what you were just saying. This is Finian, of course. You can find me on Twitter under the account called Liberty Pro PI. I'm a private investigator and residential security expert. And the other main site that I'm on is steemit.com, and I'm over there as @Finian, FINNIAN. Yeah, my water bill each month is like $80, and we've been buying spring water from Deer Park for over 10 years now. So I've stopped, I didn't drink tap water for a long time, and the tap water is so nasty by design, probably, of course, that I wouldn't drink it even if I had to. I'd go out and get some other, I'd find some other way, basically.
On my side, I actually had a different comment to make on that because Nestle, I didn't realize, and Jesus, that's a lot of water, and not surprising they're not getting any comeuppance, as it were, because well, lobbies. But hey, that's how the system works.
I've actually read cases where they've drained people's wells. So they're taking so much water from the local community that the person's well will dry up. And of course, there's nothing they can do about it.
But when it comes to water usage in California as well, it's highly inefficient because the almond industry, for instance, uses about $1,000 worth of water for $100 worth of almonds. And to me, that screams massive inefficiencies that are only available via, subsidy. So it really doesn't make sense why people would grow almonds in that region if they need to use that much water to make it work. Grow something else. Grow something that requires less resource and can be used as a similar product. It'll also, to be quite frank, increase the cost of almonds, benefiting all the other almond sellers who can actually grow the product efficiently. Simple. But hey, that's what happens when you allow a state to control how your water is distributed. It just doesn't freaking work.
Yeah, there's lots of places like that in the U.S. though, where people live. So like, New Mexico and Arizona and places like that, they get their water brought in from other places, and that's the only reason why people live there is because they're getting water brought in from other sources. And it's like, hey, how about you just don't live in that area? Crazy idea, I know, but
Well, and because the primary problem in a lot of cases with this sort of thing is that Nestle came into a territory that was already somewhat poor. They'll come into a territory that was already somewhat poor. They'll make massive profits taking the water that used to fuel the local environment, sort of degrading the local biome. And after all of that is said and done, they'll like throw in an attaboy like a baseball diamond or a football field or something like that. And people will say, "Oh, well, we have that thing now. We wouldn't have that without Nestle. How many jobs did they bring in? Oh, they brought in so many jobs, but how many jobs did they take? Nobody ever looks at that. Nobody ever looks at the unintended consequences. Nobody's interested in the invisible hand. They're just interested in what's happening right in front of their faces. And Nestle exploits that ignorance and that sort of blithe blindness that people have very, very effectively.
It's just such a basic resource, which is actually supposed to be fairly well controlled, particularly in California, where on your land, your water that you've got is yours. It boggles the mind to think that people are just merely concerned. They should be freaking angry. They should be incensed by this wastage, by the double standards. They really should be. But I guess they just are blithely unaware or perhaps gullible.
As part of the problem, it's heavily fluoridated. The tap water is heavily fluoridated, so there's one of your reasons why most people don't give a damn. They're used to it. Don't ask questions. Get along. Yeah, I was just looking it up too. Nestle bought Deer Park, and ever since Nestle bought Deer Park brand, the quality of the water that we've been getting is way less. So I don't know exactly what happened behind the scenes, but it's one of the reasons why we're more motivated now than ever to move somewhere with natural water, because we can't buy quality water anymore, even from Nestle.
Okay, and on that level, looping it. Let's switch gears here for a moment. You had a story on David Hogg. Mind starting to discuss that a bit?
Yeah, if you want me to bring that one up next. Let's have a look here. Right. So, from the Independent in the UK, part of the America's reporting, Parkland shooting survivor David Hogg's house raided by SWAT after apparent prank call. Police responded to Parkland teenager's house only to find no one was home. A SWAT team was called to a Florida home of Parkland school shooting survivor, and 2 schools were placed on lockdown after someone made a prank call to the local sheriff's office. The Broward County Sheriff's Department received a call at 8:39 a.m. claiming there was someone with a weapon inside the home of shooting survivor David Hogg, a department spokesman told The Independent. 2 local elementary schools were placed on lockdown while the incident was investigated, according to CBS. When a SWAT team arrived at the residence, however, they found no one inside. The sheriff's department determined the call was a prank and is investigating who had placed it. Mr. Hogg did not tweet directly about the incident, but did remark on Twitter shortly thereafter that he could really use a chocolate chip muffin. Okay. He later told CBS that he had no idea who made the call, but called it a distraction from the issues at hand. This is a serious attempt of people trying to distract us from what we are trying to do here, which is solve the gun violence epidemic and get the youth out to vote. Think of the children. Mr. Hogg has been a target for many on the American right because of his strong stance on gun control. 17 of Mr. Hogg's teachers and classmates died in a shooting at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in February, prompting him and several classmates to start a campaign for stricter gun control laws. The students have helped organize marches, rallies, and lobby days across the country. From the early days of the campaign, Mr. Hogg, an eloquent and outspoken 18-year-old, has been the target of conspiracy theories, claiming he's a crisis actor or an FBI plant. One conservative blog suggested Mr. Hogg may not have even been at the school at the time of the shooting. Later, Fox News host Laura Ingraham mocked the high school senior for being rejected from several colleges, causing a number of advertisers to boycott her show. Mr. Hogg has continued his activism, however, telling ABC News that he is taking a gap year before college to focus on lobbying for gun control. He plans to take a 60-day round trip called March for Our Lives, Road to Change, to encourage young people to register to vote. The teenager was Washington picking up a Human Rights Award when the prank call was placed. Okay, so that's the end of the article. But personally, this is slightly hilarious because just the ironic level of insanity that is involved. From the Independent making some sort of implication that his need for a chocolate chip muffin is related in any way to the fact that SWAT raided his house. Just leads me to believe that they're phoning this one in just like they've been doing on a number of American news articles. But particularly for me, the fact that the Broward County Sheriff, again, didn't really recognize that maybe this was false, didn't really do anything to contact or see what was going on, perhaps maybe do some very basic exploratory calls to the house or anything that could have maybe preempted the use of armed men being sent to a property. The fact that 2 schools were put on lockdown is probably just SOP, so I'm not going to question that one. Bit over the top, perhaps, but I guess they're at least now actually dealing with credible threats directly in a responsible and meaningful manner, which is not what they were doing on the day of the shooting. But hey, that's what happens when something bad happens and guards are not doing their job originally. They then are very, very efficient at doing their job all of a sudden. But that's just one man's opinion on the matter. What's yours, Jeremy?
Oh, I'll get Finian's opinion first.
Oh man, there's so many things about what went down there. Well, the biggest elephant in the room would be the two teachers. One of them that was grazed, actually shot in the shoulder, that looked like eye to eye down the hallway and saw the shooter, and it was a man in full combat gear with face mask and full body armor, and he was holding a rifle that she said she had never seen before, implying it was not a typical AR or type of weapon. And, her and another teacher, two credible witnesses, saw this guy. It wasn't just her making it up. Lots of other people saw them too. And the supposed shooter, he took an Uber apparently to it with a small school typical backpack. So there was no way he could have carried all that gear with him. Hogg in particular, there was even a tweet that, of course, has been buried, but there was a girl on Twitter saying that he went to a totally different high school and had graduated like the year before. He didn't even go to that school. And then, of course, we know for a fact that his dad is like a retired FBI agent or something. So there's all kinds of problems with that issue. Halbig, the former detective from Florida, has investigated that shooting down there. And he also investigated Sandy Hook, and he believes the shooting did happen at the Florida high school, but it did not get done by that kid. And basically the whole story as we're being told is utter bullshit, like lots of other stories we've been told.
Well, yes. How many bullshit school shooting stories or bombing or terrorist or active terrorism stories are there in the world? It does beg the question, doesn't it? Because this one has been pushed hard, more so than any of the others that I've ever seen, including Columbine, which had genuine problems. I mean, there wasn't really to be fair, that much gun control at the time, compared to now at least. And it was a lot more open-ended, the question, does it work or not? Because it had some success elsewhere. But it's been shown statistically that, and you cannot deny the average statistics counteracting the specificity of demographic-based ones or any other identity politics ones. If you look at the overall totals of number of deaths in the US caused by guns, and the number of, and not suicides, I mean homicides, actual crime. If you're going to commit suicide, you're going to, and you mean it, you're going to do it with something else if you don't have access to a gun. It's simple as that. And if you're going to commit a crime, like we said earlier with the knife thing, you're going to find a weapon. You cannot ban all the things. Where are you going to end it? You're going to ban fists and having hands? Nobody needs fingers anymore. Nobody needs feet, heads even. I mean, a headbutt really fucking hurts. And you can knock a man out, and if they, yeah, honestly.
The knife thing. What was the deal recently where they wanted to have rounded knives now?
Yeah, they want to dull knives. They want to make them rounded. They want to make them dull. And I have had knife injuries where I've accidentally stabbed myself. I have severed nerves as a result of blunt knives. So it's not something that you can really sneeze at here. It is a serious issue because you get very ragged cuts when you get poked with a blunt knife. You get very precise ones when you get poked with a sharp knife or get sliced with one. And those can be sutured well and easily and not have many complications if you can get to them in time. But when it comes to blunt knives, you are looking at a larger amount of damage. But back to the gun points, the statistics the CDC has been collecting, they've been collecting for decades. And for the past decade or so, the rate of homicides has been below 15K per year nationally. That's recorded from every hospital and morgue, basically, as far as I'm aware. This is where they're getting their death stats. They also did a survey that was buried, which was proof that defensive gun use was in the realms of about 2 million events per year. And in most cases, no shots were fired. People de-escalated the situation by putting the perpetrator to the gun rather than allowing somebody else to call the cops and wait 15 minutes for no support whatsoever. So it's that kind of principle that kind of proves the argument that guns do protect people. They don't cause crime. To ban the tool is effectively equivalent of shooting the messenger. It doesn't stop the reality that crime happens. It just changes the means of implementation. And let's be fair, in Britain, you can't have a knife, you can't have a gun, but apparently a bottle of acid is fine.
Right, yeah, and then places like Sweden and France where they already have really strict gun controls, and then, of course, if you believe these things are all legitimate attacks, they've got fully automatic AKs and grenades. So, like, what they weren't already outlawed?
Oh yeah, the Swedish grenade problem, that's incredible to me. It's like, yeah, I want to buy some cocaine, and can I get a hand grenade thrown in for that? Cheers, mate. It just, how do you get black market grenades prevalent in a society? It just doesn't make sense to me. What's the point?
Yeah, Paraguay, I'm probably butchering the pronunciation, but I've looked into that country for expatriation purposes, and people down there tell you basically that if you have the cash to buy it, you can buy anything. An RPG, a grenade, it doesn't matter what it is. The black market will provide it. Not saying I would want those things, it just I was kind of surprised by that it's the market's that, open. That many things are available.
Well, as you brought it up, well, the region at least, you mentioned Paraguay. What have you heard what's going on in Nicaragua?
No recent news. No, what's going on there?
Well, this is quite recent news, and it was going to be my next piece anyway. So if Jeremy doesn't have anything to say specifically on Hog or the weapons or anything like that.
Well, I don't know. I guess I could just say in general, the whole David Hogg situation is emblematic of the way that things have been tainted. Because let's be completely realistic.
Amen.
He doesn't give a shit about, death. He doesn't give a shit about mass shootings. If he did, I posted this a short while back. If he did give a shit about any of this stuff, his first step would be opposing police brutality, and maybe his next step would be opposing the military-industrial complex. But no, he wants to disarm his fucking neighbors because he's a little fucking cunt-ass twat who thinks that the only way to improve the world is to beg government to please make it better, all while they make other people's lives worse. Cops kill like 50 people a month. Wait, what was it? Like mass shootings? More than that. Mass shootings kill like 50 people a month. Cops kill an average of like 100. The military industrial complex, according to Watson Institute, kills like, fucking what was it? Like 1,100 people a year, or sorry, a month by civilian casualties alone.
Speaking of those stats, when Lupinate was mentioning it, the first thought that came to mind to me was, let's take out from that 15,000, whatever number it was, let's take out police shootings.
That's a high estimate, by the way.
Yeah, and then also take out gang on gang, because we'll never stop gang on gang shooting. So if you take those out of it, it's going to be a lot smaller number.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, there's one way to stop a lot of that gang-on-gang shootings. Make the gangs economically unviable. Best way to do that, end the drug war. You end the drug war, and you will find that gangs will pretty much spontaneously become their own businesses.
Yeah, they'll move on to different business practices.
Or move on to different propositions. And there'll be
the reason that the drug war hasn't been ended. It's because there's a really, really big gang that profits the most from it, and it's known as government.
Don't forget about Big Pharma. There are reasons why government profits off it. And it's because they have investments in companies that profit off its existence. The whole idea of banning drugs is to prevent people from having easy access to things that either will alleviate pain or provide performance enhancement or something else that they want to be able to provide at a much higher markup. And it's as simple as that. That's the only reason why it happens.
Yeah. Yeah, doctors.
And it doesn't work.
Yeah, and doctors getting, like pain management doctors getting their patients addicted to opiates so they can charge them $800 a doctor's visit. So the person has to go in once a month and they're charging them $800 a month. So I wonder why that doctor would want to put you on opiates that basically keeps you addicted for the rest of your life until you die. I'm surprised there.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to be able to probably read the next article that I was going to say out loud because I'm worried about copyright and things like that, but it's reporting the news, right? It's not anything else, is it?
What is the next article? Because I had one last thought on the David Hogg thing.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, mate.
People like him, and this, the oligarchs or whoever you want to say, basically, that's behind this push to disarm people.
Yeah. He's a useful idiot.
It's not a threat. It's a statement. Let's put it this way. But I think they're going to have a serious problem if they move in a strong way against guns, because I have a line in stone, and that is military-style weapons. So if a day ever comes when my military-style rifles, and they're semi-automatic, they're not full auto, and I have a trust, so I can get full auto if I want. I can have suppressors. But if a day comes when they tell me that I have to turn those in, that's the day when a hot revolution starts in this country. And I know it's not just me. So the David Hoggs of the world need to be very careful about how they're treading, because maybe the assumption I have is I think they want that hot revolution. But if they try to make those types of weapons illegal, millions of people are not going to comply. It will immediately start a bloody war that I don't think they're going to end, that's going to end well for them, basically.
No, it won't. And no, they aren't. They think they are, but they really aren't. And I think my next article from the Boston Globe will probably give a significant... It's basically a cautionary tale for what you are exactly describing. Because there's always something that pushes people over the edge if you're a ruler. If you're a ruler, there are rules you have to follow to remain a ruler. And it just takes a little bit of enough of a push to really fuck a ruler up big time. And that's what's happened in Nicaragua. According to the Boston Globe, Nicaragua is on the brink of calamity. The article has a very nice picture of a fire outside the National University of Engineering in Managua, Nicaragua, during protests against Daniel Ortega's government. This was from June the 4th, by the way, by Stephen Kinzer. A mass of unarmed protesters filed past Dennis Martinez Stadium in Managua, Nicaragua on May 30th. Snipers inside the stadium began firing at them. That day's casualties joined a list of about 100 dead and 1,000 wounded and missing in the last 2 months.
Good God.
Among those outraged was the person for whom the stadium is named, Dennis Martinez is the most celebrated of all Nicaraguan baseball players, immortalized by pitching a perfect game for the Montreal Expos in 1991. It pains me to see the national stadium bearing my name being used for violence against my brother Nicaraguans, Martinez declared in a public statement. The novelist Sergio Ramirez, who was Nicaragua's vice president in the 1980s, tweeted that with this statement, Martinez pitched another perfect game. Ramirez had just been awarded the Cervantes Prize, the highest honor in Spanish language literature, and dedicated it to the memory of Nicaraguans who have in recent days been killed on the streets for demanding justice and democracy. Nicaragua is a land of volcanoes and earthquakes. At times it seems the fury churning underground must somehow be reaching above the surface, making national politics especially turbulent. This is one of those times. Protests that shook Nicaragua in mid-April did not quickly fade as some expected. The opposite has happened. Nicaragua has entered a phase of civic insurrection. For the second time in as many generations, Nicaraguans are rebelling against a decadent family regime. A historic turning point is approaching. During the 1980s, Nicaragua was a battleground for proxy armies representing the interests of the United States and the Soviet Union. Since then, it has remained poor, and over the last decade become steadily less democratic. Nevertheless, it seems stable. President Daniel Ortega, who helped lead the revolution that brought leftist Sandinistas to power in 1979, appeared to have consolidated his authoritarian state. So basically, just to interject, this is just another frickin' socialist, people. Okay? This is just another one of the people that you think will bring you social democracy or whatever you want. Democratic socialism. That's the new buzzword, isn't it? It's all bullshit. And you need to realize this before it kills you. Right, back to the article. He continued to use anti-imperialistic rhetoric, but allowed the business elite to make economic policy and won the support of Catholic bishops by banning abortion. Now this alliance is collapsing. Catholic bishops have rejected government appeals to mediate in the current crisis, declaring that, quote, it is not possible to resume national dialogue while the people of Nicaragua are being denied their right to protest peacefully and are being repressed and murdered. Business leaders who supported Ortega because he guaranteed stability now see him as a source of instability and are turning against him. Quote, the model he brought to the country has run its course, unquote, said Carlos Pelas, the country's richest tycoon. Pelas told an interviewer from the opposition newspaper La Prensa that he was outraged and in pain over the carnage of recent weeks and described protesters as representing, quote, a clamor for the return of democracy, justice, and human rights, and urged Ortega to arrange an orderly exit through early elections. If he refuses, business leaders may support a national strike that could paralyze the country. There's another article that they did regarding journalists being killed in Nicaragua among 24 other people during the unrest.
Yeah, I'm reading that article now. It's most unfortunate about this, and it kind of pisses me off, and it's just a general complaint, but I had no idea this was even going on.
Of course not.
Yeah, the Western media is completely covering this up, so I'm kind of embarrassed by the fact that I had no fucking idea that this was even happening. Like
Neither did I until today.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, this news only existed since 2 days ago, and I'm really quite shocked nobody picked up on this. Nobody. Yeah.
And they're using live rounds against protesters. I mean, granted, the protesters have rocks, but this is the same thing that happens in Palestine.
Rocks versus bullets.
Yeah, in Palestine, the Israelis have 10-22 long rifles, real bullets, and they justify shooting rock throwers with real rifle rounds. Like, who cares if it actually kills them? Because, apparently that's justified according to them. So, yeah, they're shooting live rounds at kids throwing rocks. And it's
just collateral damage.
It's the same thing in Nicaragua.
Yep. Value of human life is non-existent.
Got called in.
Right, let's continue. Ortega, unfortunately, has remained defiant. We are staying here, he assured his supporters, adding in a swipe to business elite that, quote, Nicaragua is not anybody's private property. God, except his, obviously. I'll get into that one in a minute because that can keep me going for the next hour. Yeah, it isn't anybody's public property either. It doesn't work that way, right? The police and army have remained loyal to his government. As an aside, let's see how long that lasts. Rather than order them to repress protesters, however, he often sends paramilitary gangs. Sandinistas have used this tactic since the 1980s, but never before have their gangs fired live ammunition into crowds of peaceful demonstrators. Funeral marches balloon into new protests when they are attacked, the spiral intensifies. This is basically the double down situation, where you continuously try the same tact that doesn't work and makes things worse. So you continuously try the same tact that doesn't work and makes things worse. Ad infinitum. Hundreds of thousands have taken to the streets. This is by far the largest popular protest in Nicaragua since the uprising that toppled the Somoza dictatorship in 1979. The protest began after Ortega announced cuts in pensions, but that was not its root cause. Pressure has been steadily building inside Nicaraguan society. Each time Ortega took another step towards repressive rule and got away with it, he felt encouraged and pressed ahead. Neither he nor anyone else realized how angry Nicaraguans were becoming. Now it's clear that he went too far. And that is the tie-in that I wanted to make for Finian's previous point. In the years that... I mean, it's probably worth taking a small break on that one because it's critical for people, including the elites, to understand this. You push good men too far, they break. And they break hard on your head. They will not stand for this, especially the ones who are trained and know what it means to be a responsible gun owner. They will feel incensed to disobey the law because it is their right to do so in that instance.
Sort of like medical marijuana using veterans in America who were trained to kill for the U.S. government, but now that they've got psychological issues, they can't use something that it's proven to reduce those and treat them because otherwise they lose their rights to gun ownership.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's and that's an atrocity to me because they've, quote, committed a felony. They can't own a gun. And because they consume a plant.
Yeah, the government's making the law so that a felony is much, much easier to commit these days. It's very easy to commit one.
People probably are committing a felony right now and they don't even know it. That's the God's honest truth.
Isn't there like a book on that? Like you commit one felony a day and you don't even realize you're doing it.
Yeah, I think there are a few now. I know John Stossel did an entire report on how you can't sell lemonade in New York. And if you try, he basically was told
illegal everything.
Yeah, if you try to do a lemonade stand in New York City at any age, it does not matter. You will be sued. You will basically be fined for an illegal business. And what you can do is you can give them the lemonade, but you cannot permit them to consume it. Yeah, because it does not conform to health records. And this is on YouTube.
And if anybody wants to read something about this, read Joel Salatin's book, Everything I Want to Do is Illegal, War Stories from the Local Food Front.
Yeah, I mean, it's things like this where you constantly publicly control everything. You create a single point of failure for everything. As you give it more and more things to control, it needs more and more resources to do so. It becomes more centralized. It becomes overly complicated and inefficient to the solution that is needed locally. So it breaks down. And as it breaks down, people slowly wake up to it. But once you reach a critical mass, like they have in Nicaragua, people very quickly begin, the process accelerates, and it can accelerate exponentially. If it happens in one area and can be quickly suppressed, then without too much of an incident, then it can be contained. But eventually, you will reach a situation where everybody is pissed off at everybody else. And the ones saying you don't deserve the right to a gun will be the ones who have their backs against the wall. That's the problem. For them, at least. And I don't want to, I'm not threatening them. I'm not trying to say that this is something I want to happen, because I don't. I really, really don't. I don't want America to descend into a hot war. We don't need that. We can avoid that. It is something that can be avoided. But you need to stop thinking with your feelings, people. You need to start realizing logic can see you through on this. But until you realize that problem exists, this is going to continue. And it's probably worth continuing the article now, just so that you can see what will happen, the kinds of things that you could expect to happen if you keep pushing things the way that you are. This is basically prophecy.
Yeah, and these, we have multiple examples from all around the world, from recent history, where people that have been disarmed end up in the situation where all they have is rocks, and they're throwing rocks against a military with tanks.
Yep.
And I don't want that to happen here. And that's the reason why my line in stone is military-style weapons. You know, you can see actually in the Western media why they're so adamant against military-style weapons, and they completely ignore pistols, even though pistols are used in tons of crimes, because they know
they're more prevalently used in all gun homicides in the States. A rifle is incredibly rare.
Yeah, yeah, and even the one school shooting, they came out and said, I think actually it was the Sandy Hook one, they said that the kid used an AR, and it was a lie. The rifle, if it was even there, was in the trunk, and supposedly he used 2 pistols, but the media doesn't cover it. But yeah, as a defensive weapon, a rifle is your best weapon as an individual.
It doesn't fit their gun control narrative, mate. That's the problem.
No, not at all.
The gun control narrative says that a rifle is more dangerous than anything else on Earth, even though we had them back when we had the revolution.
Well, the main difference, and of course they don't come out and say it, and some people on the other side don't come out and say it, but the main difference is my rifle will go right through your body armor. So if you're swatting my house, and it doesn't really matter, basically. If I have a high-powered rifle, it doesn't matter what you're wearing. I mean, you'd have to have some pretty serious body armor, and that's the main reason why they don't want them, because from a one-on-one, man-on-man, whatever, sexist as it sounds, you know, one person shooting a weapon against another, that rifle is going to just destroy you. And I don't ever want to be in a situation, and I don't want my kids in a situation where they have to throw rocks at somebody with a rifle. I would rather die than have that happen in my future. And that's the problem we have today, is that a lot of places around the country or around the globe are like that. I mean, Odessa is a good example of that. All those people were slaughtered in Odessa, and they had military and police units killing them. And because of their current laws at the time in that place, they had no way to defend themselves. Absolutely none. And there were cases in that situation where they were jumping from a burning building, and as they fell 3 stories and were wounded, people were walking up and shooting them with guns to finish them off. because again, they had no weapons to defend themselves. So what could they do about it? Nothing.
Exactly. Right. But I got a little bit more of this article to get through as well, because there's a bit more of the story. In the years since he was elected president, with 38% of the vote in 2006, Ortega has worked systematically to dismantle the Nicaraguan incipient democracy. Through a series of maneuvers, he gained control over Congress, the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Electoral Council. In 2009, he directed the Supreme Court to rule that he could run for re-election even though the Constitution forbids it. Then last year, he not only ran for a third term, but named his wife as his running mate. His control of the electoral system guaranteed their victory. Their children have become rich. One has been groomed to lead the Ortega family rule into another generation. He wants a dynasty. The last round of local elections was manipulated to assure the defeat of each anti-Sandinista candidate. Each of these outrages added to Nicaraguans' anger. No one imagined that something as relatively innocuous as pension cuts would set off the time bomb of accumulated rage. Repressive rule was imposed on Nicaragua slowly, one outrage at a time. For more than a decade, Nicaraguans grumbled but did not act. This spring, they finally erupted. Their example is an object lesson to other countries. People may seem to accept government corruption and a steady creep of autocracy, but they have limits. Political explosions can come without warning. It's important, and it is important for people to remember this. And I hate the idea that it could descend to that. I like to think that people in the West are a little bit more civilized in that way, if that makes sense. But I'm not so sure anymore. The civility has been dying away. Illogical thought is ruling people's minds, and rational arguments get treated as racist comments. And it's the combination of repression of the right to self-defense with the repression to speak that really freaking destroys the society culturally, from my perspective. It is the culture war. And I'll happily stand my ground on the free speech and free defense and basically being able to be a good man under the law without being told you cannot say or do anything to protect yourself.
Well, yeah, in places like Nicaragua right now, people are being disappeared and protesters are being shot. So, I mean, like, you end up in a situation where you have no other choice, basically.
Well, I'm going to now segue a bit because I've got about 35 minutes or so left until I need to turn in. And I wanted to touch on something that's, again, quite recently breaking. Actually broke yesterday. And this is from the Gateway Pundit, for reference. They are quite a right-wing website, but to be quite frank as well, they've been quite good at backing their information with source data. So you can actually read on things like Scribd the contents of what they're actually reporting from and make your own assessments from the raw data. And that I really do appreciate that kind of reporting. I can just ignore the slant and read the data myself and come to my own conclusions on it.
By the way, Finian, while he's reading that, you can load up a story to discuss after he hops off.
So this one's the main one I wanted to comment on. And there's one last one I've got after this, which will probably be 5 minutes because it's not something I'm going to read out. It's an actual paper that I'd like people to actually look into themselves because it's a mathematical proof. But and it's well written as well. So this is regarding something that's happened in Tucson, apparently in Arizona, where there's some unusual activity. So, former Navy SEAL, Tucson encampment likely used for child sex trafficking despite police media reports. Contrary to police and media reports, the encampment discovered on Clinton Foundation donor Cemex's property by homeless veterans advocacy group was most likely used for child sex trafficking, a former Navy SEAL who investigated the scene warns. The bizarre tree restraints, underground septic tank, that'd be impossible for a child to escape from, the dozens of boxes of hair dye, and the sex lubrication discovered on the encampment are evidence that the grounds were being used for more than a shelter for the homeless, which is the current narrative. This is according to Craig Solomon Sawyer, a former sniper on SEAL Team 1 and founder of the Vets for Children Rescue website, www.vetsforchildrenrescue.org. It could have been a homeless camp where people were just weird or mentally ill, but there are a group of trees that look like rape trees, Sawyer told the Hangman Report Monday night. Rape trees are essentially what the drug traffickers, coyotes, tend to want to use to rape people. They tie them into it and take their undergarments and hang them up on the trees as some sort of trophy. We found this in a camp, a group of trees with all manners of fire hoses nailed to them, and loops and different straps and different types of rope. Do I know what they strapped to this tree? No. But from knee-high to overhead, 8 feet, there was numerous ways the trees were strapped that looked like wrist restraints on them. Many of the materials attached to the trees were decaying, Sawyer said, indicating the rape trees were being used at the encampments for years. The straps were in various states of decay, and some of them very brittle. I took one of the pieces of nylon webbing and just pulled on it, and it snapped right in half. It had been dry rotted. There had been things nailed to it and tied around these trees for years and years. It looked like something was repeatedly strapped to these trees again and again and again for years with numerous types of strapping materials. That much is fact. What it was, we don't know. As Gateway Pundit reported Monday, the land on which the bunker was found is owned by a Cemex Construction Materials South LLC, a multinational building materials company in Mexico and part of the Clinton Global Initiative. The Cemex received a $7 million contract from the Clinton Global Initiative to build houses in Haiti during Clinton's tenure as Secretary of State in 2012, nearly 2.5 years after the quake. According to federal lobby disclosures, Cemex donated $25,000 to the Clinton Foundation. Authorities maintain they have investigated the abandoned camp and found there is no evidence it was used for any criminal activity, including human trafficking. From the Tucson Police Department, a tweet released on Monday. Media released suspicious activity West Valencia Road and South I-19. On May 29, 2018, the Tucson Police Department responded to the site of what appeared to be a one-time homeless encampment located on private property in the area of West Valencia Road and South I-19. Several individuals from a group of affiliated homeless veterans discovered the site and expressed a concern about possible criminal activity at that location. Tucson Police Department's officers, detectives, and command... Oh, bloody hell. It cut off at that point, unfortunately. The wrist restraints are irrefutable smoking gun, and there is abundance of damning evidence all over the site, Sawyer contends. Quote, we found sex lube there, a bunch of little dolls, children's dolls, bracelets, things like that, lotion, porn, different pornographic magazines, he said. On that site, there's multiple boxes of used hair dye. Now in the middle of the woods, folks, right off the highway that runs straight to Mexico out of Tucson. Why would you need brunette hair dye? Why do homeless people need multiple boxes of brunette hair dye? So people are getting their hair dyed dark colors in those woods at that camp that's got sex lube. No normal parent would allow their children to sleep in the extremely hot underground septic tank that was discovered on site, Sawyer noted. Small children would not be able to get out of there without some sort of help, and nobody could hear them scream or yell from inside there due to the way that it is buried. There's no ventilation, only one small hole that would have to come in and out of. Putting your child in a simple tent under a simple tarp would be much more comfortable for them than shoving them in a septic tank. It's a septic tank turned on its side. Could it have been a desperate homeless family that put their children in there? Well, it's possible, but none of us that looked at it, saw it in person, believed that would have been the case, he continued. We can't imagine putting our children in there willingly. It is hot in that container. It is not comfortable. The bottom of that container is rounded, and there is no place for even a child to curl up and get comfortable and sleep in there. It is at an odd angle and on its side. After investigating the encampment, Sawyer said he immediately called the FBI and notified the Bureau very specifically to investigate. That container, it's a solid plastic container. It should be a wealth of forensic evidence, including DNA. Could have been used by a desperate homeless person and bad weather or something? Yeah, but due to the totality, any other federal criminal investigator is trained to look around the rest of the site. We don't believe that's what it was. Americans cannot rely on the Tucson Police Department to conduct a thorough investigation of the encampment or adequately serve Tucson, Sawyer warned, because of a third of the TPD have been laid off. Tucson has, quote, laid off a third of their police officers, and many who drive the police officer vehicles are not police at all. They are public servants, they are unarmed, and they do not respond to crimes. I don't know why the criminals might be deserving of serving and protecting than the American citizens and the citizens of Tucson, but I think we're going to need to look at who is running the TPD and what is going on there. Right now, the citizens of Tucson, Arizona are not being fully served and protected, he continued. I know law enforcement officers that work for TPD, and they love serving and protecting the people. They want to fix this. They don't want to see children trafficked here. Let's get them better support. Let's get them better political backing, funding, and manpower so they can serve and protect the people of Tucson. That is something that needs to come out of this, if nothing else. Personally, from my perspective, what needs to come out of this is a freaking investigation. The very bare minimum, the site should be thoroughly screened, thoroughly forensically investigated, thoroughly reviewed, and done both independently and publicly. This is not something that can just be idly glossed over. There is a real problem with pedophilia in the West. It's not just in America. It's not just in Britain. It's all over the frickin' West. We have a serious issue here, people. No, it's not just the West either.
Yep.
This is a global catastrophe that needs to end. It is not something we should tolerate. It is not something we should support. It is something which is immoral, unethical, and in every religious perspective should be considered intolerable. Especially if you're a Christian.
On Facebook today, somebody posted something like, what conspiracy theory, if it was proven true today, would cause the most turmoil if it was proven without a doubt to be true? And I didn't reply this, but one person said like Pedogate or Pizzagate. And everybody's reply was, oh, that's not real. That didn't actually happen. I was like, what? Like, what do you mean it's not real? Like, the majority of the people out there are so
Domino's on cheese.
Yeah, they legitimately don't think there's any evidence to prove it. They think it's all fake news. Didn't happen. There is no such thing as a pedophilia problem. Even with all the past arrests, with all the government officials, with Hastert, with all the stuff that's going on with the Lolita Express, nope. Apparently, to the majority of well-programmed, fluoridated people, there's no problem
Cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is such a bitch. It really is. It's such a pain in the ass. Because you present to them. You could present to them like a video that actually shows it happening, and they still would believe it's fake news. That's the thing, because they cannot comprehend that this could happen, that any person would do this. They don't believe it's possible. Or if they do believe it's possible, they don't think it's happening around them. They think it's happening somewhere else. And some fantasy world that only exists in the dark minds of people like you or other racist scum. And oh God.
Well, on that level, let me just read this other Free Thought Project article. As media hypes Trump Kim summit, the real rulers of the world are secretly meeting at Bilderberg. War criminals, politicians, bankers, media controllers, and heads of state will be meeting in secret this week at the Bilderberg Group to discuss policy on how to bend the world to their desires. The world's ruling elite will meet in secret this week. No press will be allowed in. No one will be interviewed about it. And Bilderberg will barely register as a blip within the mainstream media's radar. As the media hypes the mostly symbolic meeting between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un, bankers, politicians, military leaders, and information controllers will be discussing their plans for the world behind closed doors and with zero transparency. The 66th annual Bilderberg meeting, which has been held in locations around the world throughout the years, kicks off on Thursday in Turin, Italy, and is set to end on Sunday, despite a prestigious guest list of around 130 attendees who will arguably have more of a global influence than any elected officials. The meeting will escape any scrutiny in the mainstream media. The reason this meeting is off the global, reason this meeting of the global elite manages to remain free from any mainstream media coverage is no accident. This group of elite power brokers owns the media, they own the politicians, and arguably they own the world. In attendance to this year's meeting are war criminals like Henry Kissinger, who will discuss matters ranging from Russia to free trade to the post-truth world. Below is the list of 12 topics up for discussion at the meeting: populism in Europe, the inequality challenge, the future of work, artificial intelligence, the U.S. before midterms, free trade, U.S. world leadership, Russia, quantum computing, Saudi Arabia and Iran, the post-truth world, and current events. Nothing highlights the insidious nature of such an event quite like having Kissinger, who can't even travel to certain countries without being arrested for war crimes, on the same list of attendees with U.S. politicians and members of the mainstream media. And all of it is happening in secret. In a book titled Henry Kissinger, Hillary Clinton's Tutor in War and Peace, Greg Grandin lays out just how corrupt this friend of Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton actually is. So it goes into some detail on all this and some of the other attendees and what it's looked like in the past. I would highly recommend anybody read it. The link will be in the description. But essentially, yeah, I mean, the Bilderberg Group is meeting this week, so Trump is going to be on the main table of discussion for everybody, so that nobody goes off to the Bilderberg meeting location, which is usually some hotel somewhere with a fairly securable perimeter, because they'll be too busy distracted with that. And that's the reason people don't give a shit about things like this rape case or think that Pedogate isn't real, because they're too saturated with things that are real but that are very distracting to actually care about what's going on. It's pretty sad.
What gets me about the Pedogate thing is, I mean, I don't understand why people don't think this could happen. There have been movies and so many movies where,
Not just movies. There's been past arrests. The UK.
I mean,
all
oh
over
yeah,
Europe,
I mean, yeah, Jimmy Savile. Just anybody who has to look at that and see it needs constant reminding to people sometimes that your heroes have often got dark sides to them. And the fact that Savile, for example, used hospitals, the BBC, and his influence as a media personality with the police to ignore decades worth of child abuse, corpse abuse, and hospital patient abuse on a massive scale. It's horrific. And it's had its brief moment of flair for about, maybe 2 or 3 months over here. And now, if you make a mention of it in any significant way, it's somehow like it's just wrong. People think it's inappropriate. And I mean, for me, it's like it's any of the kinds of things where you risk causing offense to people by making mention of something. And that seems to be a reason people don't mention things. And I say, if you're offended by something, that's your problem. It's not mine. Now, you can argue why I'm wrong, or you can argue that I don't have all the facts, and I may agree with you, especially if I haven't done enough research. But if you're just going to say that I'm offending you, and therefore I should change what I'm saying, that's not going to happen. I may rephrase it, but if you wind up being offensive to me, I certainly won't. There's a thing called reciprocity, and you need to understand that's how the world works. And it's things like this that people say, oh, that's fake news. Well, give me proof that it's wrong. Give me proof it doesn't exist. Because I can give you proof that these people exist, that they hide their crimes well, that they use influence and power to make sure they can continue committing them. And it's going to break. This particular set of crimes is going to break, and it's going to break hard. I don't know when, but once it really starts seeping into, like, when the evidence becomes insurmountable that shit is going down, it will, and it's no longer conjecture or hidden comments and emails. It's actual police departments going, this is wrong and it needs to be addressed, and everybody needs to see the data for themselves so that they can see what happened. Until they do this, this will not be believed. Somebody very high up within either the Justice Department or the FBI, when it's finally cleaned out of basically people who are working against the interests of the state, as it were. No, I'm not certain it is either. And if it does, it won't happen this year. I know that much. That much is certain.
It's not going to happen because the people perpetrating all of this stuff are capable of anything. They're willing to murder you. They're willing to suicide you. They're willing to kill off your children. They're basically, they have no rules. So therefore, they can do anything they want and get away with it.
See, this is the thing. I'm of the mind, and one of the things that the topics of discussion really piqued my interest, to be quite frank. The fact that they're talking about artificial intelligence and, more importantly, quantum computing. That kind of thing is something that I've dabbled and researched a little bit on my side, and quantum computers are the closest thing to a human brain that exists today, except that they are purely logical. So they can come up with solutions to problems that are not obvious to anybody normally, and they can break any form of encryption. Now, if you can break every form of encryption, you've just gotten in, with a quantum computer, you've gotten into every piece of data that exists anywhere. And in the hands of good men, such data could be used to compile a list of targets, shall we say. to actually resolve the problem. And with the data, you can then find who has physical evidence. Where is the raw bank transaction information, for example, on any actual trafficking going on? Where is it coming from? Where is the money going? There's going to be a money trail. This is the point, and it's just a matter of finding it.
It reminds me, there's a YouTube documentary. I'm trying to find the link for it. I don't have it right now, but there's a documentary that basically they're interviewing the victims of past sex crimes in Australia. And again, it could all be BS. These girls could have made it up, whatever. But the assumption is what they're saying is true. And this one girl describes being brought out into the middle of the country to this place that looks like a castle. And this is where all this abuse went on. And part of me is frankly happy that I've never known about a place like that or been privy to its location, because I wouldn't report that to the FBI. That would be a place to go and just kill everybody that's there and just walk away with your mask on the entire time, and you sleep better at night knowing that you just killed all those people. Because my assumption is that place exists. It exists. I mean, all these girls that were being interviewed, I don't think they're all lying. And a place like that probably does exist, like the whole Lolita Express and all these other freaking places. And that's what needs to happen to them. Because if we wait for the so-called justice system to do it, or the government to do it, it's never going to happen. Never going to happen.
Well, this is the thing. There, the sealed indictment issue, don't you? Within the states. The sealed indictment issues within the states.
No, what do you mean? Explain it, please.
How many have been... Do you know how many sealed indictments have been issued recently within the past 18 months?
I keep hearing that number, and I know it's astronomical, like 15,000 or something.
No. That was in January. That was in January. Pacer, there's a Pacer report. Pacer reports.
So somebody's actually looked this up, and it really is happening.
Yeah, somebody is basically there are active Pacer reports on this topic. They're like all over the web on Scribd. They've basically been documenting this over the course of months. By the end of December, it was around 15,000. By the end of March, it had gone up another 10,000. There's something in the effect of like 20 to 25K sealed indictments. And thing is, you should know this, sealed indictments aren't just necessarily for one person, are they? They can be for entire groups of people.
Yep.
So it's, and like you said, it's astronomical. The average before
how many people are involved. It's so out of control. And that's why when somebody says, "Oh, none of this is true," I'm just like, really? You don't think any of it's true? It's like, this is so out of control. You have no idea. Like, this has been going on for decades, if not centuries. So this is a serious problem. So people to just say, no, it doesn't exist. It's not happening at all. Like, they're crazy.
It's the thing. I mean, it's with the OIG as well. I mean, I have props to the man. He's trying to repair the system from within by rooting out corruption. I will not say he is doing a bad job. He has been patient, he has been thorough, and he has been following process. And if you're going to do this, if you're going to make it work, you have to use the system to grind the system back into some sort of form of semblance of worth. It's never going to happen properly till people realize the system itself is horrifically flawed and must be abandoned for something better. But until the pieces are in place, they won't really realize that in the long run. They're getting there. The pieces are coming, but I think quantum computers may push it over the edge And that's the God's honest truth. If people get their hands on that kind of technology, I know for a fact the amount of information that can be revealed to the world on what is going on and what their governments are actually doing is insane. There are people out there who can do amazing things with technology today, just software, and no one will see them coming. And if they were people,
Anonymous has done stuff like that.
Exactly. I'm alluding to them. I'm trying not to mention them specifically.
Like a law enforcement officer that's a rapist, they'll go out and track this guy down and post all of his private information on the internet. So yeah, basically, because everything is on the net these days, it's very difficult for people to hide their crimes. You could be completely off the net, like a serial killer or something, and still theoretically get away with it. I mean, like Charlottesville, for example, where I live, has a serial killer, pretty much. Nobody talks about it. They act like it's no big deal. Some patsy from the emergency department in one of the hospitals here recently was supposedly arrested for the crime. But people have been disappearing. Women have been disappearing from this area for years, and the guy's never been caught. And the MO for this is an older white dude, and my assumption basically is somebody's protecting the guy, and so far he's not been found.
He's somebody's brother.
Yeah, he's somebody in a powerful position or a relative of that person, and stuff like that goes on and nothing gets done about it. But like you were saying, some of this stuff, like the Clinton campaign's activities in Haiti, 20 years ago, they could have easily gotten away with that because nobody would have heard of it. But now, if you look up Clinton campaign Haiti child sex trafficking, holy shit, you'll see all this stuff that went on. It's like, really? This is like directly related to the Clintons. I mean, Bill Clinton
and
actually
Epstein.
Stepped in.
Never forget Epstein.
Yeah, and Bill Clinton actually stepped in to broker a deal to get 8 of the traffickers released. I mean, like, nobody hears about this stuff on the news, and then when you talk about it, they think you're the crazy person. It's like,
of course
really?
They do.
Yeah.
It's like, I had an argument with somebody today about that Navy SEAL article, and he was basically saying, oh, it's from the Gateway Pundit, therefore it's fake news. Okay, so you're denying that this is what this guy said? You're denying that in this YouTube video, this guy, not Gateway Pundit, this Navy SEAL or former Navy SEAL is lying? What evidence do you have to back that up? And he shared the same article that Gateway Pundit is biased to the right wing. And I just went, do you know what a genetic fallacy is? Because you really are constantly doubling down on this now. It ain't going to wash with me. So present some evidence that this guy is, or calling you a sheep is being complimentary. Honestly, there is no excuse for being ignorant in the modern day world. Look at what you think is true from the sources you believe, and then look at what everybody else is saying as well. Because if you don't, you're getting one view of reality. You're not getting the full view. You're not getting an objective view. You're getting a very subjective view, one specific interpretation. Diversify your sources of information as much as you can, because if you don't, you're just going to be led along like a little puppet, dancing to their tune until there's really nothing left for you to do, and you're just in a gilded cage.
Sadly, most people aren't paying attention. I'll lay awake at night just wondering, like, if this is the same situation that early colonials in America, like they were laying there thinking of the same things. Like, are we really going to have to go there? Like, in a year from now, are we going to be fighting? And you could say the same thing about modern day stuff, or, before Nazi Germany, like the Germans in Nazi Germany. Like, were there people laying awake at night thinking, like, wow, Joe down the street just disappeared and all this shit's going on. Like, like the cognitive dissonance in their mind. They're like, is this really happening? Like, what am I supposed to do? Am I going to leave? Am I going to fight? What is
Well,
my
this
goal?
is
And in
there have
America,
been
it's there right now. In America
yeah.
right now, that's where we're at. Because like you said, I agree, there are sealed indictments, and maybe or maybe not they'll get acted on. I mean, like right now in the military, there's a split. There's like all kinds of what you would call patriots. And my definition of patriot is somebody that is out for and willing to defend individual liberty. There are people in the military in the US that are like that. And it's like, to me, based off what I know, I'm surprised there's not been a military coup yet. Like
that's
all
one
these
of the
players
things.
going on, yeah.
If you follow the QAnon thing, and I'm not saying that it's true, it's an admitted psyop. People, the Q character said quite explicitly, it's 80% like classified, 20% public. That's the definition, effectively, of how to action a psyop. So he told everybody what he's doing. This is not necessarily 100% going to go as he states. But there are things that he highlighted that have directed people to start looking for incongruities. And there are so many incongruities when it comes to the pedophilia problem in the States. There have been a lot of crackdowns, actually, as well, by the government on pedophile rings in the past 18 months or so.
Well, ongoing. There was one breaking today on social media about Disney, right? Disney executives and all these
Is
other
there?
people. Yeah, and again,
I wasn't
nobody was
aware of
talking
that
about it.
one. I wasn't aware of that one, to be fair. I'm going to have to look that up tomorrow when I'm a little bit more compos mentis.
It was buried.
But yeah.
Yeah, it was buried. Most people didn't see it.
I'll have to look up Disney pedophile scandal then. But yeah, there's.
Well, and see, here's the problem with something like QAnon is that rabbit trails work, and they're called that because you can be led to many different dead ends. And I think the QAnon thing is designed to lead people down very specific rabbit trails that look like they're leading in a good direction, but aren't. So I don't like it very much. I want people to pay attention in their own way instead of trying to get it from a drip-fed information source, even if that drip-fed information source is somehow accurate. If it's inaccurate 80% of the time, then there's really 0 point to it.
Oh, I agree if it's inaccurate 80% of the time, but I'm not certain it is inaccurate 80% of the time. It's classified what's going on, and what is visible may not be what is actually happening behind the scenes. I think that's what it means. That's what a psyop means.
And a lot of this stuff, unfortunately, just people don't care. This gets back to like bombing other countries. Like, if it's not their
happening
children,
to you.
Yeah, exactly. If it's not their children, it's not their spouse being blown to bits or their house being bombed, they don't care. Yeah, I just looked that up actually. You can Google Disney Legoland employees arrested in child porn sting. That's like breaking news as of today. No surprise either with Disney behind it.
I just got one from the Free Thought Project. It was the first article on DuckDuckGo. Weinstein scandal exposes Disney for giving convicted pedophile access to kids as a film director.
Oh, you just reminded me of something that's just ridiculous. But my dad
that was from a year ago.
This is an actual personal story related to this exact issue. My dad lives near Orlando in Florida, and I was seriously considering moving there. Like, I was going to get a new job and move my entire family down there. And there's a website called like watchdog.us, and basically it tracks pedophiles and child criminals, basically like child rape or indecent indecent exposure and stuff like that with children. And if you go on a website and look at that, around Orlando and places like Disney, there's a child pedophile on like every block, literally every city block. It's the most concentrated place of child predators that I've ever seen in my life. It's like, well, as soon as I saw that, I was like, nope, I'm not moving there. Sorry, not gonna happen. Yeah, the whole Disney thing does not surprise me at all.
Hmm.
And it makes
But
sense,
yeah,
like, right?
it's
All these child rapists, they end up being like Boy Scout leaders and stuff like that. So obviously, why wouldn't they work for Disney? I mean, it
yeah,
makes sense if
it
that's the
makes
kind of thing
perfect
you're interested
sense.
in. Yep, that's the job you're going to pick because it puts you in close proximity with your victims.
Same thing's probably true for most theme parks, carnivals, any place where you take young children. It's really quite sad when you think about it.
Yeah, it is. I mean, my dad's house, right down the street from him on the corner, there's a child rapist. And
Jesus
and yeah,
Christ.
and where I live, and I don't even know why those people still are alive either, by the way, but where I live
Because
in
most
Virginia,
people
there's
are I can explain why they're still alive. Most people, even when you tell them, they don't want to believe it's true. Even if they tell you, I am a horrible human being, they'll disbelieve you because they don't encounter them on a regular basis. They don't engage with them. They don't try to, they just pretend they don't exist because that is easier than actually trying to take responsibility for them. And most of them have abjured themselves of that responsibility already and given it to the state. And they want the state to deal with it. And they basically say, well, the state says this, therefore I'll appeal to authority because that works for me. But it won't if you have a kid that winds up going over there because his ball fell over his fence. It won't if he winds up getting access to an ice cream van. It won't if he winds up working at Disney.
yeah, it's just not
So
worth the risk. If you love your children, you're just not going to live in a place like that.
I'm not going to advocate that people go out and do things that are contrary to the rule of law as it stands because it won't serve them benefit, but they need to push for tougher laws on this problem if it's going to work in their system. If it isn't going to work in their system, they need to abandon the state being the solution. And they need to do that first. Because otherwise, down that road, real madness lies. We will have violence in the streets. We will have things that I don't want to see. And I will do everything I can to prevent it. And I'm not going to let it stand either. And
in my county, there was a county sheriff's deputy that was arrested for molesting. They always say like sexual assault, but he was basically raping his special needs cousin.
Jesus
And
Christ.
yeah, and the media and the sheriff's department and everything just played it off like it was this no big deal. And of course the guy got slapped on the wrist for it. So the county, I mean, I'm in like a really affluent, wealthy county. And
I know
so far that I
Charlottesville
know of,
fairly
there's
well.
been
It's
two.
nice.
Yeah, but there's been two deputies so far that have either been arrested for rape or child, crimes against children sexually. And like, really? So yeah, if you're depending on the government or the agents of the government to defend your children or to defend what's right, it's never going to happen. Sorry.
No. I've got one last thing that I wanted to highlight, and I've given all of these links to Jeremy to share in the description. But this one's a bit of a read, and to be quite frank, I can't do it justice in the amount of time I have left, but I wanted to leave it last anyway because it is actually a mathematics article from mdpi.com on entropy. And what it basically, it doesn't really make it obvious in the description or anything, but they try to explain using mathematics and a load of examples throughout the history of evolution. That the purpose of evolution is to try to deal with the concept of entropy. Now, for those of you who aren't really that into science or didn't take chemistry or physics that seriously, entropy is the concept of everything falling apart, basically. Everything generates heat. And one of the things that is very difficult to do is make that heat something that doesn't affect what is going on either in the body or in the organism or in the device. Heat is a real problem for computers, for people, for every form of animal and every single process, because heat is always something that is generated from every action. Now, the whole purpose of society, effectively, of every economic system, of markets, of ecology, is to try to reduce the amount of energy that you need in comparison to your local environment's need. It's put it the way they put it. Continuous energy to be sustained in a homeostatic state away from the decayed state of its local thermodynamic equilibrium. So the idea that you've got a local region which is in constant decay, and then you have an organism which is trying to maintain and be at least static in functioning so that it actually can work at the same time. And those are two states that aren't really conductive to be possible at the same time. You can't maintain something constantly for all eternity in a system where everything eventually decays, everything eventually dies of heat death, effectively. It runs out of energy at some point. And
peacekeepers.
Yeah, it's unbelievable mathematics because it's very high level. And I'll be honest, I'm still having to read it again and again just to make sure I'm getting this right. But it's basically suggesting you could simulate the universe as a giant computer and then try and work out everything would then try and work out what is the best way to manage entropy. And the best way that has been, and that is basically why evolution happens, mathematically speaking, is in order to combat entropy, we have evolved. That is the only reason why we have evolved, is to combat entropy. But combating entropy has lots of effects. And the concept is basically decentralization in a number of ways sees you through. You get a lot of collaborating organisms that work together, and some that try to attack the other organisms around them. But most of them within the body work together to create a harmonious environment for us. And occasionally bits go rogue and try and take over and wind up destroying it. Same thing happens in society. We get people who want to rule other people that then try and take over that society and wind up destroying it and ruining it for everybody. And then the cycle begins anew. And perhaps it's inevitable that that will continue, but I like to think that we can learn from the reality, the mathematics that guide how things work and can actually find a way to voluntarily do everything that we need to do without somebody having to punch you in the face to make it happen, or without accepting that it's okay to it's okay to accept all cultures as equal, because then there's no way to say one culture is better than another at all in any way, shape, or form. You can't make a value judgment on it. And yet,
some cultures are definitely more ethical than others, though, right?
Oh, I am going to wholeheartedly agree with you on that. I'm saying it's horrible to say that all cultures are 100% equal, because they objectively aren't, because they're all different. And if they're all different, there has to be some reason for that.
And here's something else. Equality doesn't exist. Nowhere in nature, nowhere in any sort of creation, nowhere anything has equality. Equality is a bullshit concept designed as a goal for people who either have been manipulated by the elites or who have been, you know, essentially inducted into the elites. Because there's zero purpose to striving for something fundamentally impossible, and there will never be material equality between anything, much less philosophical equality. What we can shoot for is, you know, an ethical approach to how to deal with that inequity, but to use like inequality as a negative and equality as a standard, to me seems like a losing game. Real good way to lose.
And you're
it really is.
And the only equality we should have is equality under the law. The law should be simple, but that's the only equality that should ever exist.
Or how about this?
Yeah, I'm equal to you. The police officer is not unequal to us. The government agent isn't protected by special rights or double standards. We're all equal in the law. That's it.
Or how about this? The law is inherently unequal, so any law that isn't natural and doesn't respect property rights is no law at all, but much less a government edict that we must obey under the threat of violence. I mean, realistically, there will never be equality under the law as long as the law is centrally dictated, because the central dictator of law must inherently hold a position higher than anybody else, you know?
And he's always bound. He's always bound to the people he has to keep sweet. Because if they don't want him as ruler anymore, he will not be ruler anymore. It's as simple as that. You have to bind the military, business, and at least one of the other major political groups. If you've got those three, at least, you're pretty comfortable as a dictator. If you've got only two of them, you're going to be a bit weak. If you've got one, pray to God it's the military, because without the military behind you, you will not win as a ruler. End of, categorically.
Yeah, Egypt being in one side of that argument and Nicaragua being in the other.
Oh, yes.
And Optimus, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what you think of what was just said?
I am Optimus Christ, because you can't turn into a truck.
All right, so like with the whole equality thing, maybe I'm misunderstanding a little bit here, but I'm assuming you mean equality of outcome.
Equality of anything, yo. Equality of basis doesn't work either, because we all start from different places. Like that's
Correct.
what's fantastic about hearing all these diversity fucks that say, "Oh, well, we come from a diverse rainbow of people, but we should all be equal." Then why don't you just make your color brown? You know? Your big old flag. Why don't you just make it a big old brown colored flag so that you can symbolize us all being the same from a starting point and from a conclusion point, instead of doing your multicolored thing that acknowledges, hey, we're fucking different.
And we always will be, and genetics always will be. And the only thing we should strive for, again, is equality under the law, which of course, like you just said, is good luck. Good luck finding it. You're not going to get it.
I mean, and to
you
be
won't get
specific,
it unless it's polycentric.
And
it's
to
as simple as that.
to be specific, nobody be exactly like me. Fucking don't. Don't be exactly like me. Don't be exactly like anybody.
No.
But I'm not a standard, and nobody else should be your standard either. Be your own standard. Hold yourself higher, and don't hold anybody up as an idol in front of you to worship and adopt their principles, because if you do, that's a good way to get set up to get knocked down whenever that false idol fucking fails.
Amen.
So go ahead, Optimus. Sorry.
I was like, oh, I was okay. So we're doing this. So we're going there. So brass tacks. The two things that should be told to everyone every single day is that facts don't care about your fucking feelings. That's number one. Okay. Number two, the universe will shit on you any chance it gets, and it will not stop. You will not catch a break. It's what you do at that moment that defines who you are. If you bitch and complain about, oh, well, my beginning was here and, I never had, equal stuff. No. 1,000 times no. Do you know how much your parents sacrificed just to get to that point? Shut the fuck up.
Amen.
And it's like based because at that point between the ages of 1 and 18, guess what? You are relying on your parents, correct?
For the most part, usually, yes.
Right. So back in the day, I'm not saying now because I've seen people with kids that continuously think about themselves. Back in the day, I'm going to assume that they looked out for the interest of their kids, the well-being of their kids.
Sort of.
Yeah, and to at least give them an environment in which they could thrive in.
Well, sort of, sometimes. I mean, because here's the thing.
They tried to.
The nostalgia bias is very strong in a lot of people, and I would advise against thinking that it was so much better then, because realistically, there were a lot of people who had sort of like good intentions, but use those good intentions to a very malicious result. Like, instead of trying to find out what's really wrong with our kid, let's just bloodletter. That should make the horror demons fly out. I mean, there are plenty of fucking examples of people being worse to their children in the past. Intent isn't really relevant. It's the results that are. So, I mean, realistically,
it's implementation that matters.
Right. So,
it's what you do with it ultimately. It's
right.
You find yourself in any given situation. You find the best way logically to get out of it and to turn it around into your favor.
Right.
Okay? That's with everyone, regardless of where they start. So what makes anyone else think that they started at a lower place, that they're any fucking different? Universe is the universe. It's going to shit on you whether you're low or high.
Well, this is especially go ahead, Vinian.
This is part of the warrior ethos that I'm always talking about and typing about. Life is going to shit on you. And the difference between the warrior, female or male, and the non-warrior is the non-warrior is going to whine about it. The warrior is going to step up and stand back up and fight back. And that's what's lacking today in the world, is that we have a lot of people that just have lost that ethos. They've lost the warrior ethos. They don't understand it to start with, and then they don't know what to do with themselves when they get shit on. And, that's the kind of stuff that we need to be teaching young kids, is like, hey, look, you just got shit on. Well, guess what? Life sucks, and that's going to happen. You need to step up and stand up and move on.
So the way that I usually look at it is like a cycle, right? Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times.
Yeah.
Good times create weak men. Weak men create hard times. It's a cycle.
That's a fair assessment, actually, as it stands, because but I'd argue that there's a reason for that cycle occurring, because instead of having people get complacent in good times, this is the reason why things fall apart. People need to realize, this is why I brought up the entropy article, because people don't think things are always falling apart. They really don't. They think things will tomorrow will be the same as yesterday. That is what everybody really hopes for in the long run, if things are going well. And you can think that, and you can believe that with all your heart. But then your house burns down. You get cancer. An earthquake happens. A volcano blows up in your backyard. Something is going to happen to you. It's going to happen. You can't stop it. You can only mitigate it. That's the best you can hope for. And when it does happen to you, pick yourself up. You have no other choice. There's nothing else you can do except just basically completely break down. And what good is that? How does that help you? It doesn't. It just means that you're going to have a hard time. You got to find a way to deal with it. And you got to find a way to deal with it that doesn't require you to beat everybody else up in the process.
Or aggress against them, yeah. You know, there's videos out of Guatemala's volcanic eruption. Basically, there's a video where the guy is driving down the road, fleeing the pyroclastic blast, and he's driving past people that are walking. And then, of course, there's photos. All those people died. They're all
obviously.
Because he didn't stop to help them. And, you know, me and my family were talking about it. It was like, well, I would stop to the point where I could give everybody a ride until it was putting my own family at risk. Like I couldn't fit any more people in the car, basically.
Well,
but there's a video of the guy.
Hang on. A pyroclastic, to be fair, mate, a pyroclastic flow travels at something. It's at a fucking fast rate. If he's just ahead of the edge, I ain't gonna fucking blame him for not stopping. That's survival. That's the dreadful algebra. Okay, yeah, it's a fucking tragedy. But ain't like he's evil for it.
No, I'm not saying he was. I mean, again, I'm like, until you're in that situation, you know, there's no way to judge what the guy did. But people were basically buried alive in super hot ash.
Yeah, I mean, they as soon as it hit them, they're dead. To be honest, as soon as they basically got to within a certain range, they're dead. Dude, you should have come on earlier.
Oh, me? Sorry.
Hey, Idiots Gray, what's up? Yeah, I mean, my main thing, and it gets back to the Warriors ethos thing, is a lot of people will say, like, oh, I can never prepare for that. There's nothing I can do to affect that in my future, so therefore I'm just going to do nothing. I'm going to keep watching professional sports and just wasting my time. There is some stuff you could do. For example, you cannot live at the foot of a volcano. And I feel sorry.
That's one thing.
Families, like it goes back to one of my past research choices. I was debating on going to Panama, and one of the Panamanian expat popular locations is a town called Boquete, and Boquete is at the bottom of a volcano. And of course, I'm like, maybe that's such a good idea, right?
Yeah.
Like, those are the decisions that people should be making. Like, you need to do your research, basically, and
especially make that close to like toxic fumes regularly. Like, it's not a very good idea.
Well, Panama, they've forgotten it basically, because in Panama, the last major eruptions were in like 1550 and 1620. So everybody assumes, oh, well, that volcano is never going to erupt. Guatemala just happened.
Yeah, that's what they thought about Pinatubo.
Yeah, and the dollar's never going to default either.
And
what was shelves?
And Kilauea was an active volcano, and they never thought it would do what it was doing. They still don't know when it's going to stop either.
Exactly.
But hey, this is the problem. You can never prepare for everything. And I'm going to probably finish on this for me, because if I'm honest, because it's 25 past 1 here. But you can't plan for everything. You cannot do everything yourself. You can do a lot of things yourself, but there's no way that you can do absolutely everything that you need to all on your own. Not right now. You need to get things like insurance. You need to get things that can cover you when
You don't need to.
shit hits you. Yes, you do. Trust me.
Well, if you want to make sure that you can
If
be
you're-
safer,
if you
of
are-
course, but you don't have to
if
do
you
it.
are-
Like, that's the thing. You have a choice to do it.
It's a choice, but it's a choice I recommend people take. That's what I'm trying to say. If you're going,
Gotcha.
if you want to have full protection, you need to outsource that shit. You can't all do it yourself. So you need to have, if you want it, you need to have somebody else do it for you. And when you do that, you'll get a bunch of people who will work on it, not just you. You'll be the one who has some input into what happens. And what you get in recompense can then be used to offset whatever additional things you may want. But in the end, you're the only one who's going to be able to determine what's best for you and get the best for basically whatever bad circumstances come from you. But none of that can happen if you don't outsource that problem to somebody. And God forbid you outsource all of them to the same thing. Because, yeah, that's what you do if you get the safe. Yeah, that's why government sucks. Is the more you outsource to them, the less they really care about you, and they care about the companies that will actually be doing the work. Because it's never the government that really does it on its own. It's always the government courtesy of some company. Because it's the companies that get the license. It's the companies that get the contracts. It's not one entity that does all the work. So the system still is going to be a market-based one. It's just there won't be any real competition. And you'll be stuck with shit choices that don't care about the cost.
Well,
the government always outsources.
Well, and in Hawaii, those people can't get insurance. Like the southeastern Kilauea, the residents that live there, I'm pretty sure they did not have insurance on their houses. They couldn't get it because they knew that that was an active area. If you live in a
to be fair,
hurricane
if you live in an if you live in an area where it is known that at any point in time your house could evaporate because of lava, you are a very big insurance risk. And I don't blame those companies for not insuring them for lava damage, because it's a very high probability and it's a very high cost if it happens. So the only advice I can give is don't buy or build property on a volcano, especially if it's an active one. It's just
one of the largest active ones on the planet, right?
Exactly. It's like the one that is producing the most land at any given point in time right at this moment.
Yeah, you know,
that
I
is
bet all
above ground.
I bet all those BuzzFeed sorts of people who went to those places and said, "Hey, these people are living on a volcano," are like really kicking themselves now for encouraging that.
Yeah. Well, another problem that Hawaii has is go to Google Earth and like turn on the sea floor and all those types of options, and you'll see how steep the slope is on every single island for Hawaii, and it's like a pin in the sky basically. It's super steep, like 2 miles high, and there's been numerous debris fields from past collapses. And one of the things that they're concerned about now with Hawaii is that the southeastern slope could collapse into the sea, which of course would create a tsunami, and it would kill,
wipe out the rest of the island.
Yeah, like I mean, the past, in a smaller group, a friend of ours, I was talking about moving to Puerto Rico, and one of the guys was like, "No, I'll never move to Puerto Rico because it sits literally on a cliff on an ocean floor." And if you go and look at it, he's right. And Puerto Rico suffers from small earthquakes at all times. So,
dude, get out of the Chesapeake area then.
Yeah, nobody mentions that kind of stuff, but it's like, maybe I should not bring my family there and settle. That's
You
probably not a
might
good
want to
idea.
you might want to consider just somewhere inland then, mate, because if I'm honest, if even near where you are, there's a serious tsunami risk. The Chesapeake Shelf is not very stable.
Yeah,
And
I'm at 400 and something elevation, so I'm fairly safe where I'm at.
fair enough. Just don't go too close
I
to
just thought-
Norfolk then.
I just tell people to go to Colorado. That's like the best
Yeah.
place to go.
At the moment, it really is, to be quite frank. It's fairly well protected. As long as you stay away from Colorado Springs, you should be fine.
I grew up there, dude.
Because that's where that's where NORAD is. That's the only reason I mention it. Because if the shit really does hit the fan and the glassing begins, that's going to be a target. But
Yeah, the whole state of
apart from
Colorado is
that,
gone. The whole state
well,
has so many bases and things like that, dude. The whole state is just fucking a military powerhouse.
there'll be a few places that'll be reasonably secure because of their distance from everywhere. But they will be oases in a glass desert if that were to occur. And thankfully I know a few of them, so it is still a viable location. You just have to be careful about where you go. That's all. Anyway, guys, I'm gonna have to break off. It has been quite a lot of fun doing this. I don't know if I'll be able to do it on a Wednesday that frequently, so and
Yeah,
I
just
don't
let me
know about
know.
others. But when I can, I'll jump on these.
You'll be back. Thanks for making it, man. Have a good night, friend.
Yeah.
Me too.
Catch you later, Nate.
Cheers,
well.
guys. Take care.
Remember, praise Doug.
So, this is a news stream. Do either of you have any news stories to bring up that basically happened between last Wednesday and this one?
Yes, I am excellent in bed. I can lay on that motherfucker all day.
Okay. I'm anticipating.
What have you
your
guys
next
covered
one.
so far? I'm still feeling pretty down, but like that's why I wasn't able to jump on as early as I usually would have. But what have you guys have covered so far? Because I probably have the same news stories.
We've covered Tommy Robinson, David Hogg swatting. We've covered the 55-gallon water limit in California. We've covered the Bilderberg Group meeting and it being distracted from by the Trump Kim summit. We've went over what looked like a child rape place in, I forget where exactly, but it involved like an empty septic tank and like a rape tree. At least that's what it looked like to the people who were investigating it. We went over like to some degree Pedogate and the whole thing there. And we also went over Nicaragua and how the dictator there looks like he's about to get unseated because people are very angry with a long list of things. So things like that.
Okay, cool, gotcha.
I'm
Well,
glad he's
here's a-
taking note. I lost track.
I have maybe we can touch on the whole Star Wars thing, like a social news, I guess. It's about it. It's on my mind a little bit, I guess.
I'm not sure what the Star Wars thing is.
The character of Rose, she got like harassed and shit online and stuff because like the character Rose in Star Wars: The Last Jedi sucked ass, and so like a whole bunch of people are attacking her and stuff and whatnot, and it's like this whole uproar about it,
Okay.
and it's kind of stupid. And then there's
Wait,
also
is this-
the
Is it
What was that?
related to like how all the men are whiny bitches and really weak, and the women's roles are super strong? Is that kind of stuff, or something else?
yeah well it's mainly about like how the social justice portion of the newest Star Wars and Disney that whole time is going on, and people aren't very happy about it. Like I kind of find it annoying, but it's not like I really care as long as the characters are good. You just can't make them awesome for no reason. But what's happening there is that the character Rose, because that was a really shitty subplot, and like the character was just sucky, and the actress wasn't even that good either, my personal opinion. But the whole thing was that she was posting like on her Instagram stuff, and she got a whole bunch of hate on her looks and stuff like that. And then a whole bunch of people were saying that it's because she ruined Star Wars and a whole bunch of crap. And it just is exploding. It's like, that's crazy. I just find it kind of stupid. And then there's also the whole Melania Trump thing where people was like, oh yeah, she's dead and everything like that. And that's kind of fun to look at.
Yeah, I saw that. So on that level, what started the Melania Trump is dead rumors? Are you familiar with that enough to tell me?
Yeah, I believe that she was going in for like a kidney surgery or something like that. And she wasn't online or doing anything like that. No one had seen her really, and it was pretty much all under wraps. And so the media was like, "Oh, what's going on? Where's Melania Trump? Is she dead? She's not alive, guys. She could be gone. She could have left Trump because she's finally done with all of this shit and stuff like that because they hadn't heard from her in a while. And like when they did hear from her, it wasn't really her normal kind of statements, I guess. And so they're still like, "What's going on here? Oh, Trump's losing his wife and shit." And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, it's kind of crazy because people jump to these conclusions out of nowhere too, and that's one of the biggest conclusions they've jumped to is that she's dead. It's like, why are you going to automatically assume that?
Well, they don't jump to it, out of nowhere. Like I went over this earlier. I think that this is a very clear case of like divide and conquer, distract, and like rule essentially. So like the people are very distracted with stories like Melania Trump. And they can't focus anymore on the things that Trump actually does or the things that the deep state is still doing in the background. So it wouldn't surprise me if the whole thing was just like immediately concocted. And the more they can get people focused on whether or not Melania is okay, the more they can get people's attention diverted from what they're doing.
Okay, gotcha. So it's like another just a cloak and mirror type thing, right?
I wouldn't be surprised. I have no specific evidence, so I'm not saying it is that way, but it's certainly something that they could use and that they probably are using for that. Even if there is something wrong with Melania, I mean, it's still fundamentally a distraction story.
Yeah, true. Like all media is pretty much distraction these days anyway. Puff pieces, destruction pieces, whole bunch of things. And like that's my issue with journalism too these days is like you're supposed to have journalistic integrity, right? It's supposed to be a thing. You're supposed to be able to provide the people with truth, not just opinion, which is they have opinion pieces that they say this is an op-ed, but literally it seems every single one of their pieces is an opinion piece.
Right.
And that like the media's bias is all hell, right? Every facet is they have their own biases in them. That's a given, as it's all right about people, and we all have our own biases for sure. But the thing is, like, you want to try to be as neutral as possible while you're writing these stories, while you're telling people what's happening.
Right.
Tell them the facts. Don't be like, oh, this happened, and we believe this. Like, no, don't say we believe this. Say this is what's going to happen, or this is what could happen. Like,
right.
When you start using words like believe and things like that in your news, it kind of fucks it up.
And the problem with the... Go ahead.
It's even worse than that. Propaganda in the United States right now is now illegal. Like literally, you can look up, you can Google and find articles entitled, for example, U.S. repeals propaganda ban, spreads government-made news to Americans. For decades, a so-called anti-propaganda law prevented the U.S. government's mammoth broadcasting arm from delivering propaganda to American audiences. But on July 2nd, that came silently to an end with the implementation of a new reform passed in January. The result, an unleashing of thousands of hours per week of government-funded radio. So yeah, today in the U.S., government propaganda is legal. So literally anything that you see in the news could be completely fake and it's legal. That's how bad it's gotten.
Well, and also the fact is that like a lot, you can have one op-ed, and countless quote unbiased news stories. But if your social media does nothing but share the op-eds and doesn't share the regular news stories much, and then the regular news stories aren't going to get clicks. The sensationalist media will get clicks because it's sensationalist, and then you can perpetuate the cycle ad nauseum because you can justify it to stockholders because these people aren't paragons of virtue. They're fucking companies. So
yeah, exactly. And the thing is too, like most people these days get their news from social media. They're not sitting in front of the TV or anything getting their news from that, which is just as bad as all the op-ed pieces that are fluffing out there. But at the same time, it's like you're looking at all the news, you're trying to get as much correct information as you possibly can. And I don't ever take news or anyone's word as absolute truth until I hear it a fuckload from multiple different biases and things like that. I'm like, okay, then that's probably true. But I'm just like, I'm one to do that. I'm one to look at multiple things. Other people either are too lazy or they don't give a fuck enough to look at other facets. And so they see one site as their trusted site and they go for that, which will ultimately like fuck you in the long run. Like you won't know what's really going on.
right.
The problem's so bad though. Like we were talking earlier about Nicaragua. Literally, I had no idea what was going on there, and it's because on the internet, for whatever reason, where I live in the United States, that news is never showed to me. I had no idea how bad it was, and there's people in Nicaragua right now being shot by police and government snipers, and the people are dying in droves. No, in Nicaragua. The government there is shooting protesters and disappearing people in droves, and I had no idea it was even going on. And I was telling Lupinate, I felt embarrassed that I had no idea that it was going on. But that's how badly the quote unquote matrix is controlled. Like I didn't know it was going on because there was no reference or there was no news that was revealed to me that told me that was happening. So that's how bad it is.
Happening? Do we know the reason why they're doing that? Is it like a civil unrest thing, kind of like
the Ortega family is trying to prevent themselves from being ousted from government. So you have basically a Western-backed dictator that is trying to maintain power, and all the people are sick of it, and they're dying to stop it. And you literally hear nothing about it. Nobody has even any idea that it's going on.
Wow, yeah, that's insane. I'm pretty sure also because you guys remember back in I think it was 2013 or something, Crimea, when that happened with the Ukraine. That got blown up really quick, really fast. But that was also still when Obama was in office. And the thing about that was one country was trying to take over another portion of a country, and they just did it without a vote or anything like that. And because it was part of the Ukraine at that point in time, it's a very strategic portion to have, especially in wartime. So it's really confusing when shit like that happens. Other countries so if we're going to pay attention to these big countries, why not these smaller countries too? Because the smaller countries can just make as much of the impact on the world as these big countries like Russia and Ukraine and the United States and things like that, Because if they're doing something and they have enough power and they're killing their own citizens and things like that, just so one person or one group of people can remain in power, you're going to look at that and go, what the fuck? Okay, we need to change that too, because if this is seen as it's okay to happen, if no one's looking at this, then it's going to continue to happen in other countries as well. And it could lead up to bigger countries.
And it'll lead to the smaller countries using their entrenched power to make deals with entrenched powers in other nations, like the Gaddafi trying to get off the dollar thing and get to Pan-African gold-backed currency, and then suddenly he died, and fucking same with Bin Laden to a certain extent. Same with what's his fucking name? I always forget his name, but he's the head guy in Syria.
Assad.
Assad.
Assad is trying to do that too, I think, and that's why the U.S. government is constantly hating on him. Because you're fine as a dictator as long as you play ball with the bigger nations in the hegemony.
Yeah.
But if you start to try and play your own game, they'll axe you real quick.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Well, in Crimea, it's a majority ethnic Russian population, and they legitimately voted to declare their independence from the Ukraine.
Yeah, they did. They did that after Russia took it over, though. And so that was the biggest issue. It wasn't the fact that they wanted to be part of it. It was the fact that Russia went in there first, and then they had the vote. Because I remember that happening too. And I remember like, okay, if they want to be part of Russia, let them be part of it. That was my whole thing. Like, if they want to be, cool, fine, let them do that. You know, kind of like if states want to secede, let a state secede. I'm all about that. Do whatever. Like, I understand the economic structures and how it would break it or help it and whatnot in these cases. But it's like, to enact that will upon it first is my kind of issue with what happened. Like, if they really wanted to do that, why not let them vote to do it? Don't just go in there and be like, okay, now what do you want to do? Do you want to join us now? Because we kind of already took you over. So do you really want to continue? And what would they going to say at that point? Were they going to say no? And was Russia really going to leave? No, Russia wasn't going to fucking leave. That's a strategic point. They're going to want to keep that shit.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, Russia was still going to stay there.
The Russians had a pre-existing agreement to have, I forget what it is, but it's like 50,000 troops in Crimea as part of, again, a previously agreed agreement. So the troops were already there, and Crimea is like one of their main submarine bases in the Black Sea. They weren't going to give it up. It just wasn't going to happen.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
the idea that those people were going to vote in favor of the fascist coup regime of western of Ukraine, it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
Nope. Sorry.
Yeah, and then you found out how many people knew how to make good Molotov cocktails there.
Yep. It's kind of insane.
Ask the people that Donbass about that. Yeah. There's some serious resistance going on, and it's all at the militia level. And granted, they've had help. They've had help from, official military Russian defense forces that have gone in without uniforms. The Cossacks went in without uniforms. So yeah, the Eastern Ukrainians have had certainly a lot of help, but there were contractors and stuff that were helping the Western Ukrainians, the fascist coup-backed, Western-backed people. So, who blames the Eastern people for having similar forces helping them?
Yeah,
but yeah,
I agree.
By all means, yeah. What the West tried to portray that situation was an absolute lie. Those people
they tried to portray it as an overtaking. It kind of was at the same time, because Russia is a superpower. So I can definitely see why it was seen as that way too. Because if you're looking at it from a standpoint, be like, oh wow, huge government just came in and just fucking said ours now again. Anyway, because it used to be theirs anyway. Crimea used to be part of Russia. So
in Eastern Ukraine, there is one of the most important ballistic missile factories of all of Russia. So what are the odds that the Russians are going to give up that site? It's not going to happen.
The odds are zero, exactly.
Yeah, and they also had an attack helicopter factory in Eastern Ukraine. Sorry, again, it's not going to be given up without a huge fight.
That'd be like another country trying to take over our borders or our like California and things like that, or even Colorado. Like, oh well, we want that now, and we're going to take it. But no one else has any stock in here in America, really. There are some embassies, I believe, right, of other countries here, but not really that many. Some shit.
Well, right, and of course, the more this sort of thing happens, the more people get entrenched with the power that seems to be doing the best, and eventually people are just so tired of whatever struggle is taking place that they'll just, say that the lesser of two evils is better, but they'll take anything to just make the bloodshed stop. And it's once people reach that breaking point that dictators win.
Exactly. And what's also going to happen here too in the U.S., what we're seeing, hopefully anyway, is people are pissed. Either way, if you look at it, a Democrat or Republican, us anarchists, we're all pretty, livid at the system right now. So something big is going to go down, right? We all see this. But the thing is, what is going to go down? How much is going to go down? How is it going to go down? And that's the biggest thing that we're looking at right now. But most people, I would say, are also not really too caring. They want the lesser evil. And to them, the lesser evil is having a government, to have that safety net back behind them. And they're always going to vote for the lesser evil too, because they want to feel safe, And so the lesser evil, they don't care as long as like, okay, so by saying lesser evil, it's kind of fucked up in the first place, right? Because you're looking at two evils and you're like, that one, he's not as bad, you know. Stalin wasn't nearly as bad as Hitler, so I'm gonna go with Stalin. It's like, well, you're still choosing mass death. What the fuck? Like, either way you look at it, you're still choosing to get fucked in the ass. So
and by that relative fallacy, then you also have, well, Hitler wasn't as bad as Mao, so I guess let's rise the Fourth Reich here.
Exactly. It's ridiculous. People are like, oh yeah, and this happens in voting times too. You get people like, oh yeah, I want to vote for this guy. Why? Well, he's the lesser of the evils. So you know that both of them are really fucked up and stupid, and you're gonna go with that one because he said nicer things than the other guy. Okay,
well,
cool.
Right.
Let's let's go there then, I guess. What the fuck?
So obviously Heil Hitler, you know.
Yeah, exactly, right. It's ridiculous because I don't really understand that. And so what I'm trying to get across to people, kinda anyway, a little bit, is this idea of choosing for ourselves, self-responsibility. We don't need someone to tell us what to do. They're not our mommy and daddy. Like, once you hit a certain age, hell, even I would argue for fucking like 14 years old. I don't care. Once you have agency to choose for yourself, if you know something can happen and you still do it, you still got to own up to it. I mean, that's part of growing up. You still got to learn self-responsibility throughout the whole time. And so this whole idea of like, we need someone to rule over us because otherwise we're going to go into chaos. And one of the biggest arguments I'm getting to recently is without government, people would just kill each other. I'm like, okay. Are you going to be one of those people that are just going to kill each other? Like, are you going to be that jackass? Like, oh, there's no government, I can murder somebody now. It's like, well, why? You're morally fucked if that's the case. Like,
yeah, it's not the government keeping you
from doing that.
What are you going to put your life on the line to steal or take, right? Because I hear that all the time too. Like, oh, the roaming bands of, unethical people are going to steal your stuff. Like, really? They're going to risk their life and the lives of their loved ones for X? No, I don't think so. They're not going to do it.
And they also, this kind of argument against what I always present is they never take into account that I would get my friends to help defend myself, or I would go to my friends and help defend my friends. I'm not going to sit back and let my friends get fucked just because I'm looking out for myself. No, it's in my best interest to help my friend so we can both survive and we can both continue doing this. So like the biggest argument against it is really dumb when you look at it. It's like, guys, you're not understanding what I'm saying here. And if you're going to be that person who's just going to go steal and shoot somebody, you're the morally fucked one, not me, you see. Like, it's in your best moral interest to continue.
Be dead in very short order. All those predators that say that they're going to steal their neighbor's food and stuff, no, they'll be dead.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I would kill the motherfucker trying to steal my shit. Government's going. I'm going to take that guy's stuff. Like, no, you can try. I still have my defense skills, buddy. Do you want your brain to turn into pink mush on the ground? Because I can arrange that for you. It's so fucking idiotic, man. I don't get it.
Well, I get it. It's fear mongering. You're raised from a very young age to believe that the government is the only protection mechanism available, and that it's the only protection mechanism that would care about you. So, like they tell you if your parents touch you in a way, that you should definitely call the cops or CPS or whatever. They tell you that if your neighbor does it, call the cops. They tell you, blah blah, call the cops. And it's always that as the solution. And so people start to get very afraid of the outside world, constantly monitoring it for such threats, even though like the likelihood by 90+% is that they'll experience none of that during any given day. And then when they're threatened with the possibility of a world without cops, they think, because of the way that they've been lied to, that the entire thing is going to fall apart and that they're going to be very vulnerable to terrible people and terrible actions. So, I mean, it's obvious why it happens. It's sad, if anything. Okay, gotcha. By the way, what do you have to say, Optimus?
That I farted so hard that my back cracked. I was, to be honest, like I was listening to half of it, and I was playing a video game for the other half.
Gotcha.
Yeah, because I mean, with certain subjects, I wouldn't be able to contribute anything because I just don't have the knowledge for it. So it's like I'd rather sit back and listen than try to make a fool of myself.
Oh, it's all good, dude. Make a fool. I make a fool of myself all the time.
Well, for the last part of this, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, you guys want to, because I saw this on my timeline actually. I think D posted it. It was about this kid who said, or someone said that his kid was gonna get lynched or some shit like that, and like he got a huge explosion, and then the correction about it being a lie didn't come up. And that's another thing about news that we could talk about too, maybe even next week or something, because it's technically, I saw it today. It might have came out yesterday or something, but like how people don't pay attention to the correction and things like that. So like
we're after it's already we're after it's already out there, then everybody's just gonna go with what their bias has already been built in with it.
Yeah, they don't care about the correction at all.
And oftentimes they'll put the fucking correction on the goddamn bottom.
Yep.
Here's the entire
read through all our bullshit, and then we were completely wrong. Sorry guys. Like, so let me read all that and then you tell me, you fuckers. Like, hey, maybe tell us like, this information we found out is wrong as an update up top. It's like, here it still is, we're not gonna take it down, but here's why it's like, here's wrong, it's wrong, but here's the story we originally printed.
Right.
Like that's more that again goes back to journalistic integrity.
Or you could be a journalist in Nicaragua right now and just sniper shot in the head and killed when you're reporting on a peaceful protest. Sorry to be Debbie Downer.
Oh, it's all good. No worries, man.
Well, I want you all to introduce what you do. Well, to wrap up what with what you do, if I can fucking get the words out, and where you can be found. And then we'll try to bring up some of that next week on Wednesday. So it'll be same time, same place, same channel. Some of the same people. I want to get on more. If you're interested in showing up for the stream, like I think some people in the chat were, then make sure to let me know before then. I can be found at Insanity is Free on Twitter, and this will be cross-posted to DTube, so you can also leave a comment if you have a Steemit account. But feel free to plug your shit and let people know where they can find you.
You're not on DLive yet? I've had so many problems with DTube, I've pretty much given up on it at this point. But speaking of those things, I am on Steemit.com as @Finian, and that's F as in Frank, INNIAN. And you can find me on Twitter and other sites as my business account as Liberty Pro PI. And thanks for hosting tonight. I had a good conversation with your friends, and I look forward to the next one. Thank you.
I am Idiot's Query. You can find me on Twitter, Discord, and YouTube under Idiot's Query. And I talk massive shit. I try to use as much critical thinking skills as possible. I try to use my brain muscle, and I like to be proven wrong if you can prove me wrong, and I like the discussion of things. And thank you for having me on the show, man. And that's it for me.
I am Optimus Christ, because Jesus can't turn into a truck.
You can find me on YouTube. I do video game Let's Plays and run-throughs. Optimus Christ, of course. You can find me on Twitter at OptimusChrist66. Yeah, I know, ironic. You can also find me in Discord. Just if you're tired of discussions and debates for a little while and you want to kick back with a video game, then hit me up.
And I'm Jeremiah Harding. You can find me on Google by that. Once I get enough Patreon patrons, I should be able to start doing things like video game streams as well. Just got to get a better rig first. So feel free to contribute to the projects I do if you like them. And join the streams if you have some input you want to put in. The thing we're doing this Sunday is the Intelligence Industrial Complex on Shit Shooting Sunday. So if you have something to contribute in that regard, let me know and we will work that out. This has been Real News Wednesday, signing out.
Autobot.